one of the reasons that you and I are having this conversation right now is several conversations we have had have shown that I guess North America, and it could be worldwide, there's a lot of confusion over what the AW exam is comprised of, mostly because it's continuously changing, and it's continuously changing to keep up with our industry. But we end up like some courses have been taught, some rumors have been had, and so we all are kind of dealing with a different interpretation of what the exam is going to be. And then even when you read it online, there are some vagaries that can really cause some confusion. So could you explain to the audience why you are in the perfect position to be explaining what this exam entails, since you've had a very interesting vantage point over the years?
Well, yeah, I say it was only a couple of years ago. It's probably when we first spoke. Suddenly realised I'd actually been presented with this gift, if you like, because of the way my career's panned out, and it's more of a case of being in the right place at the right time. With the diploma exam, and especially the associate exam, I've been working in places where they actually hold the exam. So obviously 14 years or 15 years in the army, based at Melton Mowbray. That's traditionally where the exam was always held in the UK. Due to a building problem there about 3 years ago now, they lost the use of that venue. Whether it's temporary, whether it eventually goes back there, no one seems to know. All I will say is the Army School of Farrier in Melton Mowbray still hasn't got a roof. And as it rains a lot in England, it's not ideal. But yeah, so obviously my role as the practical lead tutor at the Hereford School of Farrier, we sort of jumped into the breach, if you like, at the time, and the exam kind of got moved there. So yet again, I'm back facilitating the running of that exam. Now, obviously my role in that is I'm not examining, and I'm certainly not sitting my exam. Obviously, I have to put all the plans, all the provisions in place for the smooth running of the exam. But when it obviously gets to the exam, of which if you put all the work in a very military way before the event, you can just sit back and just watch everything and make mental notes. So yeah, so again, I've spent the last 3 years now running the exam, sitting back, watching people pass it, and watching, unfortunately, with the associate, quite a few people fail it.
Right.
I mean, it's worth pointing out now, the associate exam, I would say on average, if we look at the diploma exam across the board over the last 10 years, I would approximately say it's probably got a 68 to 78 thereabouts average first time pass rate. Whereas the associate exam has probably got about a 38% first time pass rate.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the reasons for that, I don't know, would be the honest answer. I think the associate exam of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, it is a big jump up. I think a lot of us, when we pass a diploma exam, and then we start that big life journey of starting a business, building up a business, starting a family, there's a lot of those sort of shoemaking skills which and learning skills that we were getting throughout our education all start to kind of take a back seat, and you know them skills can get rusty very, very quickly, and then trying to get back into it to prepare yourself for the exam is it is a big jump. And for many people, and I did say this the other day when obviously I've just got involved with one of my colleagues running the new AWCF preparation course for the British Farriers and Blacksmiths. And on the introduction sort of talk we did, it was like, I said, how many in the room could hand on heart walk into their diploma exam tomorrow and pass it? You know, because we end up with skill fade, you know. Yeah, we go out shoeing every day, we're trimming feet every day, we're nailing on, we're clenching, and we're fitting predominantly machine-made shoes. It's the shoemaking with both the diploma and especially the associate exam, which make up such a fundamental pass part of it. And because you've got to be efficient, and it's got to be correct, and it's got to be at that standard. Now, interestingly as well, at the last associate exam I witnessed, the senior examiner, he, as a sort of side note at the end of the briefing, he did say, just remember, guys, this is the associate exam. Not only has everything got to be on point, it's got to be presented to that standard as well.
Right.
Like find the on button on your wire brush kind of stuff, without blowing smoke up it. The associate exam for me is the toughest horseshoeing exam in the world.
Yeah,
without a shadow of doubt. And it's good that the standard has stayed where it is. I think it's essential, and I've seen many great people pass it and go on to do better things. But in the same breath, I've seen people get on that journey and spend quite a few years trying to achieve it, and having quite a few knockbacks along the way. But the end result at the end of that journey, they are 10 times the farrier they were before, without a shadow of doubt.
Yeah, well, we've had conversations about it, and you said a lot of people, when they're done the process, say they felt like before they did it, they'd been chewing with the handbrake on.
Absolutely.
It just
absolutely
forces you to learn to that next standard, that next level. I heard Dusty Franklin gave a talk at convention for the American Farriers Association, and he said, I didn't really start shoeing horses until about 5 years ago, like to that kind of extreme, in his humble way. But yeah.
No, it's, I mean, and I look back, I mean, it was a long time ago that I sat mine, and I sat mine sort of through the army, if you like. But what I would say, I mean, I wouldn't have said before that I was cocky, but I certainly, my confidence after passing it, sort of with shoeing, talking to vets, talking to horse owners, I knew before what I was doing was right, but having that ability to be able to confidently explain why you are doing what you're doing and why you want to do what you're doing to get the best results. And I think that did all come from passing the associate exam.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like I said, I see some people in the UK, I mean, it's always an absolute trip when diploma students of ours come back to sit their associate. Some do it sort of like 2 to 2.5 years, 3 years after their diploma, which is great because your head still is quite in that learning. You've still got the exam technique, you've still got the learning processes all there, and the shoemaking should still be relatively sharp.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the big things about going and doing your associate is that experience you've gained by doing stuff after your diploma.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I often sort of say to people about certainly the theory side of the AWCF, it's in-depth, high-grade level of the diploma exam plus your experience in actually, because at diploma level, we're teaching you how to pass a test, but how to, you're kind of learning out the manual, if you like. This is how I would shoe a laminitic, for example. What we're looking at associate level is all that information plus what you've learned personally by dealing with laminators.
Right. Yeah.
Because, shoeing a laminitic horse, it's not, we don't just get a heart bar shoe out of a packet, nail it on and trim it to the x-rays. There's lots of other things which may mean we have to use a variant. We might have to do something else as well because we're fighting against forces coming from a different direction, all that other stuff, which you wouldn't necessarily know at diploma level because it's just basic knowledge. It's, the diploma levels like passing your driving test. We had driving lessons, but we didn't actually learn to drive until we passed our driving test and we had to drive on our own.
Yeah.
And that's the information we're looking for, or they are looking for, at associate level.
Yeah, it's interesting. You do see that as you go along, like in doing some of the lower level exams, you're like, okay, well now I know the textbook answer to this. And then you get those horses where the textbook answer isn't completely working.
Mm,
Like you
no.
said, you have to modify your game a bit and work with whatever you're presented with. So that makes total sense. I actually heard somebody say this, and I'm sure we'll be getting into it, but on the shoe board itself, you're allowed to use used shoes. Now, is that
Uh,
true?
right. There used to be, right. So, was well, since you've started the conversation, we might as well talk about the shoe board.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Um, it's your fault.
I know.
So
Take you
but,
right into it.
You're such a professional. Nice segue. Right, no. So the shoe board, there's two parts of the shoe board. One, it's to show, you take it into the oral exam review, and it's a conversation you have with the examiners about how that shoe functions, what's your experience with the shoe, why have you done this, why have you put the fuller in there, it's all stuff to talk about. Do you understand the biomechanical impacts of that shoe on that horse's limb if you used it? The other part of it is obviously a skills test. You present a board, they've got all the basics have got to be correct, it's got to be level, which I'd just like to point out now is one of the biggest downfalls of all the shoe boards I see when they examine at diploma and associate level, is the shoes are not even level. We come from an industry of farriers and trimmers where we are so anal about foot balance and talking about millimeter tolerances between high on the inside, high on the, yet we can't make a level horseshoe. It's
That's what the hot chewing's for.
Well, do not trust your anvil. Your anvil will lie to you. You see people trying to level shoes on an anvil, but you've got to use your eyes. It's the only way. I mean, an anvil might hint to you that it's not quite level, but I mean, I teach at a shoeing school where we've got 30 plus anvils, and there is not a single level anvil in that whole school.
Right.
Because they've been abused for the last 20 years by countless students, but there's that zone on the anvil where you forge steel right in the center, and that gets hit more than, so it's going to be not level.
Yeah.
But anyway, so make sure your shoes are level, children. It's a skills test. Now, although and again, this is where the associate information online is a bit blurry. Now, it does say you can put used shoes on the board to kind of, I can't remember what it actually says, but there is, I'm just going to find what it actually says because it is open for interpretation.
Right. Here it is under 2.3, candidates exhibition of shoes. And it says used shoes may be submitted if relevant to a candidate's own experience and representative of the candidate's own work. It's the second last sentence there.
Yeah.
In that first paragraph. I hadn't read that. I actually heard it first, but I can't imagine that having a used shoe on there is going to, like, there's just something about that.
Well, we'll pick it up from there. I mean, what I have seen in the past is someone's made a specimen shoe, and what they've done is they've got the one they've taken off a horse, cleaned it up a bit, and actually put that on the shoe to demonstrate. Let's talk about a side bone shoe. You've put that assimilated wear pattern into the outside branch of a side bone shoe to show, to help with the way that horse is moving. So I've seen in the past where people have brought a shoe they've taken off that horse to kind of show how that shoe then wore itself to that kind of plane, if you know what I mean.
Okay. But yep.
Do you really want to go to the gold standard practical shoeing test in the world, with a nice piece of wood, varnished wood, with the remnants of your scrap pile attached to it.
It's a good point
You
right
know,
there. Yeah.
Because, you look at people make specimen shoes. They cherish them, they file, they rub them, they cover them in nice black oil and stuff like that. Or do you want to get a shoe, nail it to a horse's foot, where it will basically just scrub it on the floor and tread in its own excrement? And you know what I mean? So would I be suggesting to any of my students that they get old worn shoes and put them on your shoe board? No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
One of the things, we said about level earlier, but the nail holes have got to fit. How can you test the nail hole fit of a worn out shoe?
Yeah, I was thinking that was my next question.
In the future, because like I said to you earlier when we were chatting before the start of this, there is going to be very soon a big cleanup and update of the worshipful company online information to do with the associate exam. I think it's in the pipeline at the moment, and I can see in the future that will be completely clarified, and if not taken out.
Right.
To be honest, you just wouldn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
Again, having that shoe hanging sort of spruced up on the board to kind of back up the nice version of that shoe you've made.
Right.
But again, these examiners, they've been around a bit, they understand. So they, you're not trying to show sort of like someone from the Women's Institute because you're trying to explain what this shoe does. They know what the shoe does. They've been around shoeing a long time. They've seen everything. So do you need to kind of go to them lengths to explain your rationale behind your design of shoe? No.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But on that vein, I was interviewing a gentleman, Chris Deal. He's an AWCF from Pennsylvania. And he said when he did the exam, one of the things Mitch Taylor, I think, taught everybody, because he had just done the exam and they were all prepping for it. He said, make sure you have a name for each one of those shoes, like a horse that is in your practice that you have or would use that shoe on, so that when you go and do that exam on the oral part, you can explain using a real world example why and how you would use that shoe, which seemed like a good idea.
I think the key thing here is, people like, it's come up time and time again on your podcast, my podcast, us farriers. We are very, very practically minded people. When it comes to, for the most of us, when it comes to these exams, we get very, very, I don't want to use the word excited, but we get very, very sort of like into the shoemaking side of this exam, the practical aspect. Remember, the shoe board, it's two parts to the shoe board. One's the practical aspects, and from a knowledge point of view, is going into the oral and actually talking about these shoes on your board. Again, on the associate exam, they're after 10 shoes. There's 6 of the shoes which they are telling you what you've got to make. They want a pattern bar shoe, they want a heart bar shoe, they want a fishtail shoe, and there's a few other shoes that you've got to make to have on your board. They stipulate what it is. Now, let's look at the pattern bar shoe, for example. In my whole life, I have put one pattern bar on one horse's foot. And that was a horse which didn't need it. And it was to prove a point of how it would biomechanically affect the fetlock when you put it on the horse's foot.
Okay.
And that is the only time I've ever actually put one on the horse's foot. Now, I can make them, but I've certainly not had in my practice a horse which required one. I've just not come across that horse yet. Yeah. But because they've stipulated that shoe has got to be on the board, then you need to read up and find out about what you would use that shoe for and its negatives, its positives, and everything else about it. The fact of the matter is, the fishtail and the heart bar shoe was put onto the syllabus. It was a few years ago now, but it was put on, and I think people have been pushing for them shoes to go on the board many years ago. It just took such a long time for them to put on. Now, I know there's a lot of talk that they're a bit of a thing like the pattern shoe. I mean, it's got its place, but most tendon injuries you come across now, the vet's going to cast and block up the limb with wood and do whatever the vets do, and we're not going to get the opportunity to put that shoe on because there's easier ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's still a shoe which, you know, it's a forging exercise, or, you know, and it's, your shoemaking's got to be on point, and you've got to have made quite a few to get them right. So it's good practice, but, you know, but you've got to understand that shoe because they're telling us it's got to be on the board. The rest of the shoes on the board, which are not, we've not been directed into, so it's only another 4 shoes, then rather than, I don't know, making some fancy shoe you saw someone post on Facebook, you know, we've all got horses on our round which not necessarily got major pathologies, but they just need a little bit of help, you know. So you might just have a 3/4 filled flat shoe with a softened outside border, a bit like a sidebone shoe, just to help it with its natural way of going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good enough, but you can have that on your shoe board, because, you know, the examiner's going to see that and go, why have you done that to the outside border? You're going to explain the process behind it, why you chose it, your rationale, and that's the knowledge they want to get out of you, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's that simple. You haven't got to make everything with a Massillot clip, sort of tool full of Massillot clip, medial uplift with a whip across bar. You know, it hasn't all got to be like that, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think
So,
Cody said he completely misinterpreted the shoe board and just went to town showing off every forging piece that he could do, right? And some shoes had multiple things, making them very complicated, but very hard to explain when you would use it as a real world application.
yeah, absolutely.
So he said, you know, after he realized what the oral entailed, he never would have made that shoe board.
No, exactly. The old acronym they used to use in the British Army: keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, again, was enough substance to get out of, you know, you've got a heart bar, egg bar, pattern bar, fishtail shoe, was enough. I mean, and again, remember, when you go in your oral, I don't know if it's, is it 20? I think 20 minutes you're in there for.
Yeah,
yeah, it's
like
it's
that,
15 to 20 minutes you've got. And when you go in your oral on the associate, so when you do the diploma, you do 3 lots of 10-minute orals. You do one with the vet for 10 minutes, one with the senior farrier for 10 minutes, one for the other farrier for 10 minutes. When you do your associate exam, you go into the room and they're all sat there in front of you, and you're there. It's like a proper interrogation, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Guantanamo Bay, eat your heart out. It's
Heat lamps
so yeah,
on.
they're sat there. Yeah, that's the one. White noise. Yeah, we soften you up before we send you in. No, yeah, so you go in there and they're sat in front of you, and it's just boom, 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 boom. You know, they're just firing these questions at you. When you think about it, so you've got the vet and you've got the 2 other farriers there. Of that 20 minutes, they're not going to spend any more than 5 minutes probably discussing your shoes on your board. So there's only so many questions they can ask you.
Right.
But it could be anything to do with the shoes on the board.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I know examiners have got a tendency to pick up, if you've put a shoe on your board, and it might be well made in the sense that malleol's fit, it's flat, it's level, it's well forged, but you've kind of stated with that shoe that it's for a horse with a problem, but the function of that shoe, i.e. the shape, etc., wouldn't actually do the job. You know, a horse with that problem isn't going to have a foot that shape, but
right.
You've put a nice symmetrical shape. I mean, classic example, sidebone shoe.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you see so many really well forged, nice looking sidebone shoes, but the shape's a very nice specimen shape. It's not a sidebone foot shape.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, they're going to jump on that and they're going to start quizzing you on about what happens to the foot with the horse with sidebone, and, you know, to find out if you do know it. And obviously, if you can't answer it, it's a big
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it's, do you want me to go through, while we're talking about shoe board, go through this thing? Would that be a good time?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, let me do this. So this is this short presentation, again, put this together for the associate prep students who've signed up to do the BFBA course in the UK at Stoneleigh. And it's about, obviously, with everything else they've got to do in their busy lives and prepare for the AW course, it's, we want to direct them to get this done in a timely manner. Obviously, we've split the course down into 2 modules because many people going for the associate split it, so they do either the practical or the theory first, and 6 months later they do the other part. So we've started off doing the theory part, and then after the October theory exam, we'll run out and start doing all the practical elements. However, we're having to interlace the shoe board construction with the theory side because they need their shoe board to actually take on their oral exam in October.
Right.
Now, when you take your shoe board to your oral exam, the shoe board itself will not get marked. They will only mark the shoe board when you go to do your practical exam. So it's, if you are just doing the theory side and you're taking your shoe board, I mean, obviously it doesn't look good if the shoe board's not up to standard, but you can, it's not going to get marked on that day. So if one of your nail holes is a bit sticky, it's not going to have any impact on your grade. Okay, so that's important to note. Okay, so let me just move. Oops. So obviously, the main thing is to understand when the board will be assessed, which we just spoke about. Understand the 6 mandatory shoes which have got to be on there. Talk about the other types of shoes you can put on there, and also we'll talk a bit about how important it is to put on shoes that you're comfortable with using day to day in your business, or a horse you had with a specific problem, and obviously be able to understand the actual level of competence to meet the actual required standard, because it is a high standard of shoemaking and forging. But when I say high standard, we're not talking world champion level shoes here. We're talking about basics done well, okay, for those horses with them kind of problems. Again, obviously the knowledge side of this, when it's used in the oral exam, that's when the shoe, we'll get asked questions about the shoes, but the actual board itself will not be marked until you do your practical. I mean, if you're doing it from overseas, or you're confident enough to sit both parts of the exam in one sitting, then the whole thing will get marked. When you do your practical exam, you'll get the shoe board be marked, and when you go in to do your oral the day before, after the written paper, that's when they will ask you questions on the shoes. Each candidate, you must bring 10 shoes, and they must be made by yourself. I don't know that anyone's ever been caught cheating, but again, with all the diploma and the associate exam, if you, and it is clearly written in all the exam sort of guidance notes, if you've got, for example, a board full of beautiful forged next level shoes, if you like, and then you go and sit your practical exam and your work doesn't in any shape or form reflect then shoes on the board, they can take you to one side after the exam and make you remake any one of those specimen shoes. Yes. Now, obviously, if you've not made that shoe, and you prove that over the next hour, they can disqualify you for cheating.
Wow.
Now, I don't think it's ever been done, but it is there in black and white.
Yep.
Now, I do know, and I'm going back years, where people at the diploma level have handed in shoes which weren't necessarily 100% of their own work.
Right.
Like they've found it in the scrap bin because someone else didn't want to use it. And again, this doesn't go on nowadays, but I have seen it in the past a long time ago. But again, if that shoe didn't reflect their job on the foot, so you don't cheat. No one likes cheaters.
No.
It's not worth it. Okay. And again, as it says there, there's a link on that presentation, but all the information you do need is on the website about what shoes to bring, etc. What are the mandatory shoes? And again, like it says at the bottom there, if they do think that you're cheating, you could get asked to replicate that to prove that you can make that shoe. But like I say, it's never come up before, but it's not worth, you should be proud of your own work anyway. That's why you're attempting the AWCF exam in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So again, this list of mandatory required shoes. Now, remember, all the shoes, although it says like do a fishtail, pattern bar, etc., egg bar, it's not specified whether it's aluminium, 3/4 fulled, plain stamp, concave. It's the actual shoe itself for the application of that problem. So, yes, your board in general should have a variation of concave, flat, plain stamped, 3/4 fulled, fully fulled as you go, necessary to the design of that shoe. So that's really, really important. Again, you're not going to go and make a pattern bar shoe out of 1.5 flat steel because it's far too heavy. So remember, weights a really, really important factor, and it always makes me laugh. I mean, I am an absolute lover of 5/16 flat steel. It's one of my favorite sections to make shoes out of. I don't think I've ever seen anyone in this country make a bar shoe out of that and use it on their AWCF practical exam, because people just have got this preconception that everything's got to be 3/8, or as you North Americans say, 3/8 by 1. Sorry, I always got that wrong.
Thanks for the translation.
I know, do anything to help. But no, so it's, weights are very, I mean, again, I know you use workman shoes yourself. I mean, all those Warrior Specials, they're all 5/16.
Right.
But we don't need those big, thick, heavy sections anymore, because I put 5/16 on all the time and I refit it. They don't wear them out. It's so yeah, remember, when you are making these shoes, keep the weight down. It's important.
Okay.
So obviously, the first one of the mandatory shoes is the heart bar shoe. Thanks to Bernie Chapman, probably saved more laminitic horses' lives than anything else. Just a solid staple of the farrier's remedial toolkit, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we've all put them on, but they also come out of a packet, which makes life a lot easier, thanks to Mr. Blurton. But we it's not a hard shoe to make. You just got to know there's different techniques, there's different styles you can make, and it's finding the way which works for you. I mean, to some degrees, you can even make a straight bar shoe, and I've said before, Iron Mountain Flux is one of the biggest game changers in farrier in the last sort of 15-20 years than some of these modern materials, because you can jump weld anything to everything now. It's so simple to fire weld. Massive game change. So you can even sort of drop inserts in and fire weld those in place. I mean, last year I went to a competition where one of the specimen shoes was, I think it was a workman heart bar insert, and you had to make a shoe. The specimen shoe was a plain stamp hind with a set toe with insert jump welded into it out of the gas. And it was actually quite an interesting shoe to make, and it's something we could all do out the backs of our vans if we needed to. We had no electricity.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding the heart bar and why you're going to use it. Remember, heart bars are not just used on laminitics. But what I would say to anyone going for this exam, if you are going to make one for a laminitic, make sure you design that shoe to go on a laminitic foot. The amount of times I've seen shoes on associate boards and I've gone, what's that for? And they've gone, well, it's a heart bar for laminitis. Well, why have you got toenails in it?
Mm-hmm.
We all know with a heart bar for a horse with laminitis, we put our nails further back towards the heels. We stay away from that toe area. So why stamp and Pritchell one?
Yeah.
Right. Again, you by your nail hole placement, you are showing that you understand that shoe.
Yeah.
And the impact that's going to have on the foot. So very, very important. Again, it was interesting listening to Doug Butler on one of his podcasts when he was saying about Bernie Chapman, and when he kind of started using heart bars and stuff on these laminitic horses, and about not putting wide webbed heart bars on horses with laminitis, because you're pushing onto the sole at that point when the horse is bearing weight, and you're going to start to compromise the blood supply going underneath the foot, as well as the blood supply coming down from the top as well. So it's things like that. You've got to really, at this level, you need to be really thinking about your shoe design in the way you are trying to fix an already existing problem. It's kind of like, at this level, everything you could do to that shoe to make it work its best for that horse. That's the difference between associate and diploma.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
So, but that's where your experience comes in. So obviously localizing support to an individual area. You could use it sort of for horses with laminitis. Obviously, if you do a dorsal wall resection or anything like that, it's essential you put one of these shoes on to stop the whole foot opening up like a cow's foot. You need to support the column of bones. But again, can be used with all sorts of stuff now, from negative palmar angles to hoof wall cracks. People talk about putting on shoes to stabilize it. We'll talk about this in a bit, but shoes to stabilize pedal bone fractures. So you get a bar shoe, put 4 clips. I was always taught, if you don't put a frog plate in, if you put a frog plate in, you can stabilize the coronary band. So you're only going to shut that foot down and stop it from moving about if you put a heart bar with 4 clips on, as opposed to just a normal bar shoe.
Right.
Because with just the rim shoe or the shoe with 4 clips, you're stopping the bottom part of the hoof from expanding, contracting, but the coronary band's still going to do that.
Right.
Whereas if you put a heart bar on it, you stabilize the coronary band. So I've always employed a heart bar when I'm dealing with complicated hoof wall cracks, because the last thing you want is the coronary band moving around.
Exactly.
Whilst you're trying to get it to sort of knit back together. So, and I've always had great results with that. So that's the heart bar. Again, you can make it out of steel, you can make it out of aluminium, you can make it out of concave if you want. It doesn't matter, but as long as it's fit for the purpose of why you're putting it on. Another one you've got to have on there, you've got to have a shoe with elevated heels. So again, and this is where the variants all kick in, because as long as it's got elevated heels, it could be a straight bar shoe, it could be an egg bar, it could be a shoe for navicular, it could be a old school spavin shoe. There's loads of things you could do. I mean, you could actually kill it, not that you would do it, but we just talked about the heart bar. Well, if you made a graduated heart bar, you've ticked off 2 of the required shoes in 1 shoe. You still got to give 10 shoes at the end, but that just opens it up to you to put something else in. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So there's a few combinations you can soak up there if you so wish. But the elevated shoe, I mean, there's not many cases now where we use reverse graduations. I mean, some of the old traditional shoes like the diamond toe, dub toe, etc., they were reverse graduated, but that was more about stopping hind to front limb interferences.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of people nowadays tend to use wedge pads, etc., because I think, especially with frog supports and stuff like that on some of these wedge pads, it's actually more beneficial to the hoof capsule alignment by doing that. There was always talk of, if you put graduated shoes on an open heel shoe, then the frog starts to migrate downward,
looking for the ground.
Yeah, but I think people used to, in some of the old textbooks and that, they talk about putting raised heel shoes on horses with navicular, for example. I think if you put, and we all know, because we've all done it by mistake, but if you put frog pressure on a horse with navicular, you can make it very lame very, very quickly. Yes. I think because when you put a graduated shoe and you are doing the exact opposite of that, and you're completely unloading the frog, and funny enough, it's the same in cases of bilateral side bone as well. Your cartilages are kind of set rigid, and there's no room for maneuver up in that, what was the anti-concussive mechanism. By giving yourself a bit of a void so you're not using it, it can be a lot more comfortable for the horse.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
because it's already pretty much locked up in there. So the last thing you want to be doing is trying to force it to work when it doesn't work, you know?
Yeah, you and Wayne had that conversation, right? In your navicular
that's
talk?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, actually, no, that was, well, we did mention that, but that was one of the reasons why we thought egg bars, because a lot of people went off the use of egg bars because, I don't know, whether it was us or vets telling us to do it, they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So what we ended up with the egg bar shoe, which I think we're going to talk about in a minute, is just like a massive toilet seat and a very, very skinny bottom. And of course, everything then falls through the middle, you know. So as a result, we're completely offloading the center of the foot, which, although the long-term effect of that's a pretty awful looking collapsed prolapsed foot, but we're not putting the impact through the navicular region.
Right.
You know, and again, that's, I spoke to John Nunn at length because he's got this old, quite heavyish horse he's been shoeing for years with bilateral side bone. And the only thing what keeps it sound is oversized egg bars. You know, he's tried everything from graduation bar shoes to straight bar shoes. He says, if I put a bar shoe on it, it goes lame. If I put an egg bar on it, it's sound. You know, but again, that's that kind of completely ignoring the center part of the foot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, just remember again with the elevated heels, you know, that doesn't necessarily have to be two elevated heels. You can have one elevated heel, like a medial uplift or a spiral lift shoe, you know, because we're trying to impose balance to the foot, you know, because we can't do it with trimming itself. So, you know, so it could be an elevated heel or it could be elevated heels.
Right.
So that's the remit there. Moving on, we've just spoke about the egg bar, but again, the key thing, and I think the reason the egg bar is still in there is the fact that the egg bar is a really, really good shoe, but you've got to understand when to use it and how to use it, because, you know, it's got its place. And again, in a lot of people sort of like shun the egg bars in conversation, but when we were heavily using the egg bar shoe, we didn't have the pads and packers we have now.
Right.
So we think about, you know, well, yeah, the foot prolapses through it. Well, if you put the right pad and packer underneath it, or even put a frog plate insert in there and make it an egg heart bar, you know, you will stop that from happening. So you'll gain the extra caudal support you were perhaps after, plus you're supporting the center part of that as well.
Well, and this is a good segue to a question I had for you, because on the North American side of thing, in say doing the FITS test, and it does come up in some of the higher level exams post CJF for the AFA, if you use the word support, they will take you down a rabbit hole with that, because there's this concept that the shoe doesn't actually support. It might stabilize, but what are you doing support wise? Now, is that a thing in England? Because I've seen some people give talks from over there where they actually show that example of that German designed chair where the legs go underneath and there isn't any bracing there. It's just to show that chair is holding your butt up by using that caudal support. So what is the common sort of thinking on that there for us taking exams over there?
Well, so what we've been teaching, you know, through the diploma and the higher, you know, so classic example for this, what you're saying now is you hand me a straight bar shoe, and I'm examining you, Brian, and the first thing I say is, Brian, what does this shoe do? And most students will turn around and they will say it provides extra support. Well, that's not the first thing a bar shoe is going to do for you. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to stabilize the hoof capsule.
Yeah.
I know there's been lots of discussions and talk, and I believe it was scientifically proven that a straight bar shoe doesn't necessarily give any more support than an open heel shoe, because, you know, for a normal straight bar in the traditional sense, you're not actually covering enough of the frog to actually support like a heart bar would, because that's why we have a heart bar, because you're supporting a column of bones with a heart bar. I think, and again, we all know the pitfalls of fitting a straight bar shoe with too much length. Then we're not supporting the back part of the foot. The heels start to fall inside the actual circumference of the shoe. So, and I say that's on a normal bar shoe or even an egg bar. So you're not actually supporting that hoof. You're actually allowing it to be enveloped by the shoe and it fall through the center. I think where the support comes in on an egg bar is you are fitting it, you know, you're fitting it like you would fit a shoe with length, plus you're still giving it 360 degrees of, when I say 360 degrees of support, I mean stabilizing support, stabilizing the hoof caption. And I think actually when you talk to most farriers, and because we do with our students at Hereford College, we do a lot of oral practice, and it's something which comes up a lot. And I think when they make that statement that it provides support, but when you start to pick them apart, they didn't actually really mean support, they meant stabilization. However, throwing a spanner in the works, when we talk a lot more these days about ground reaction forces and horses working on an arena surface. And you think about it, if you've got a nice substantial bar shoe on a horse's foot, when that comes in contact with the ground and the back part of the foot loads, there's no way on earth that is going to sink as much as an open heel shoe.
So in that case, that's a part of the conversation you can have with the examiner, right? That kind of shows your knowledge.
I mean, the key thing, I think, with that conversation as well, and again, having done so much of this with students, is before you open your mouth, think about what words you're using to explain it, because, and I've seen it before, and you can see it in the students' eyes. What they're thinking is not what's coming out of their mouth, because they're just using the wrong term. You're just using the wrong terminology. And I think that's, you know, there's certain buzzwords we chuck around, like support, stability, stuff like that, but we're not necessarily using the right word for what it is we're trying to get across. That's, you know, so it's going and having those conversations with your peers, your colleagues, people you look up to is really, really important, because you'll know by that what is the right word to use, you know. So, but that's pretty much, they go on about on the notes for the exam about a ring shoe. Okay, now I've never really come across it called that. I've heard it mentioned as a circle shoe, but the key thing with that is I feel that's got a lot more, it's about the shape of the horse's foot. You know, if you've got a really, really round foot, then the shoe is going to look more like a circle than an egg. You know, so if you, I know, for example, have got like a very thoroughbredy kind of very sort of overexpanded sort of round foot, then it's going to look more like a circle, than an egg. You know, it's. But again, going back to the egg bar thing, I mean, I found quite some years ago now, shooting a lot of dressage horses, and I found there was a lot of horses I was trying to put bar shoes on, but I couldn't find the Jim Blurton. It either didn't fit in a size 2 Jim Blurton bar shoe. It was a bit too small, but then a size 3 was way too big, and the heels didn't fit. Get a size 2 egg bar and it drops on. And it's, I think, you know, it depends. If you've got a really, really contracted heels, for example, and a very, very small frog with a big toe, you kind of want an egg bar, because you're never, ever going to get unless you make something like a European bar shoe or a wide bar or what I call a Brexit bar shoe, you're not going to be able to support where that foot is and then where it kind of should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, egg bars actually are a very good compromise for that kind of foot, I find, especially when you incorporate with a pad or a packer or both.
Right.
So, but that's the egg bar. Hospital plate. So the examiners want to see an example of a hospital plate. Now, there's more different types of hospital plate than soft mix. At the end of the day, as long as it's a functional shoe, does it have to be a bar shoe? I've seen hospital plates in the past which are not actual bar shoes. Does it need to be aluminium? Does it need to be steel? It's kind of up to yourself. I mean, all I would say is that horse with that hospital plate on is going to be on box rest on a deep bedding.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't going anywhere. It's obviously, yeah, I mean, it's going to have to fit the foot, etc. But the key thing is how removable and how user friendly is it to the person treating that foot daily.
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of weird and wonderful designs out there which use 1 bolt, 2 bolts, 3 bolts, 4 bolts. I was always taught the best way of doing it is have a steel shoe, because the last thing you want to do is put an aluminium shoe on it and then someone takes one of the bolts out and then cross-threaded
straps.
Yeah. So okay. You know what I mean? So it's not hard to do. So go for a steel shoe with an aluminium plate on it to reduce the weight. Incidentally, my chosen preferred method of doing it is to use 4 bolts, but kind of only thread the diagonal bolts, because like I say, it's just stood in the stable. So 2 of the bolts are actually blank bolts just for balance.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So
you only need to remove 2 bolts to remove the plate, but just remember which 2 they are. I did see one recently. A student brought one in because he was talking about putting on his diploma board, and it's not a shoe necessary to go on. I think he just wanted to show to the fact that he could use them quite a lot with his boss where he worked. But like I said, he'd actually put 2 in the heels and 1 at the toe. And I said, well, don't put that on your board because you've now caused a pivot.
Yeah, right.
If that makes any sense, because you've got to have that before, and they've got to be backed, so you've got that even sort of breaker. I know it's not moving around a lot, and it is on box rest, and it's probably not going to be fully loaded that limb, but you've just got to use. You don't want to push yourself down a conversation with an examiner that he's gonna kind of find your weak spot.
Don't give them any more ammo than you need to.
No, exactly. And again, on the oral point of view, just think about what cases you would use a hospital plate,
right?
Foot surgeries, sinkers, big abscesses where they've had to come to debride the area, canker, things like that, But again, you've got to think about it from the point of view, if you'd got a horse with canker, would you be wanting to put an open heel on or a bar shoe?
Right.
Because if you're trying to treat a canker and you've now put a straight bar over the top of some of that frog, now you can't get into the frog. So common sense.
Even pressure,
exactly.
That's sensitive. Yeah.
But so the hospital plate's quite straightforward and simple. Pattern bar shoe or the pattern shoe. So this one, obviously very, very important with this shoe is to understand the biomechanical impact that shoe has on the horse's foot. Like I said earlier, the only time I've ever put one of these shoes on a horse's foot was actually when I was studying to do my associate exam back in the army. And it was an exercise just to see how much that fetlock sinks to the ground when you lift the heels up that high.
Mm-hmm.
I wish you'd still got the photographs, because me and my mate Chris Carroll, who did the exam with me, we took a series of photographs showing sort of like the normal shot. It was the same horse. We shot it normally, then we put one of those on it just to see how much the fetlock drops down.
Right.
Obviously, the impact of that is you would not use this shoe on a suspensory or a superficial digital flexor tendon injury.
Mm-hmm.
this is one of those shoes that you're going to put on if the horse has a deep digital tendon flexor injury. You know, if you put it on for the wrong tendon, you're going to do more damage.
Yes. And it's amazing how much the foot distorts in those too. I have had a horse wear them, and I wear one. Yeah.
Now, quite a scary. Sorry, I was going to say quite a scary shoe in the sense of they're very difficult to make.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. But
realistically, well, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Very frustrating. I saw, obviously having to run this course, you never know the level of forging competence you're going to get on a course like this. So I was a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago now, I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to teach people how to make one of those, and I hate making them. But I best practice it. So I started practicing it, and I did look around. Obviously, when I last made one, we didn't have YouTube and stuff like that. And I did have a look, and I did watch an old Craig Trinker video of him making it, and he didn't use one of these jigs or vices or anything. He just made it off the anvil. But do you know what? He made it look so simple.
Yeah, as it does.
So I went down that route, although I went about constructing the shoe a slightly different way, because obviously he was making his because it was part of one of the WCB competitions, so it was a specific size measurement and everything else like that. But I was looking at it from the premise of these people are not going to necessarily be WCB level competitors, but also I want to do it so you could go and fit this on a horse and fit the shoe. Because again, you see a lot of people make this shoe and there's either the heels are too far apart, the heels are too close together and would not go on a horse's foot. So I wanted to do a way where I could actually fit the shoe before I commit myself with the actual bar itself. So I just played around on his technique a little bit, and I did find a little, very, very simple way to make the shoe and make it look nice without too much faffing about, really.
Right.
But it took quite a few. I think I probably made about 8 before I actually worked out the proper sequence to make it, because sometimes you will do one of the processes, which then stops you from being able to do it the same way on the other side.
Yeah, things get in the way really quickly.
If you like puzzles, it's a good shoe to have a go at.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, but metal origami.
Well, and this is where we should touch on an experience somebody just had with this particular shoe, and just kind of a word of caution, where they had made a variation of this where you can adjust it. I don't know if I should name names. I won't. I'll just leave it at that. But they made it so you could actually, which I have done myself as a practical means of slowly lowering that angle as the horse is healing. But the examiners looked at that and said, wait, this isn't a handmade shoe. And his shoe board was disqualified.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, again, I think there's a bit of a grey area, because, you know, without causing, I believe that shoe board had passed.
Yeah, twice. Yeah.
Before. Now, again, it's difficult. I know for the diploma exam, the examiners do a lot of very, very strict, stringent standard setting. You know, but there's quite a large pool of examiners, and they do, within a year, they do a lot of standard setting, etc. For the higher exams, in the past, that hasn't been so stringent. And I know, again, the new chairman of the examination group has put in a lot of time in trying to get the standard setting a lot more tighter on the higher exams. Now, funny enough, that exam you're on about, the chairman of the examination and one of the most senior examiners on the board as well were the 2 examiners. So, so you know, and I've since spoken to one of them about that scenario, And they said, no, it stipulates it's got to be a handmade pattern shoe, not an adjustable one. That is what they're after, you know. And, you know, a lot of these people as well do agree that actually it's kind of, I don't want to say outdated, but it kind of is, because that's not how most vets are going to treat it these days.
Right.
You know, they'll use alternatives. And again, ideally, you know, if you're going to use a pattern bar shoe, and again, when it comes to the exam and the oral, and they ask you questions on it, there's certain things you need to remember. You don't just put one of those on for a horse with a deep tissue flexor tendon injury and then one day go, okay, it's fixed now, and you take it off. You've got to slowly, gradually bring that graduation down over a period of time, or you're going to cause further problems.
Yes, exactly.
Likewise, if you've got that shoe on and it's on box rest, what are you going to put on the other side?
A supporting, like a heart bar or something.
Yeah, a heart bar. Yeah. You know, it's because, you know, we're talking about fishtails in a minute. I mean, again, I did a horse a few years ago in Israel, which was at the university hospital there, and it'd been in a cast for eight months or something like that. They'd taken the cast off, and it got flaccid tendons because of muscle atrophy and all that kind of stuff going on. So put it in a fishtail. Well, of course, it spent 8 months standing on the other back leg. It had got mechanical laminitis, so it needed a heart bar on that one. But obviously, it was 8 months too late by the time we'd done it. Yeah. But you know, you've got to do it. You know, you've got to support that, and especially at this exam level, you've got to give the right answers, sort of the worst case scenario answers. You know, if something's going to be on box rest for a very long period of time, you've got to look after the support inside. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most or almost all of these shoes, it's about taking pressure off of somewhere, and it has to go somewhere else. So
absolutely,
even the other side of the horse. So understanding that, I imagine, helps in your orals.
Yeah, and exactly, you know, and we talk about weight and stuff like that. Again, remember, when these horses are on box rest for like but not like galloping around the field, you know.
Hopefully
the weight, but with that in mind as well, you know, the amount of very well manufactured aluminium shoes out there. I know we're talking about the exam and it's shoe making, but you know, I'm talking about normal everyday working stuff. I mean, very severe aluminium graduated shoes, which, you know, with frog inserts and all this other stuff. I mean, it's like when I go down to the shoeing lab down to see my mate Kelvin Lyman, I go in his shop, and he's got this one part of his shop where I think there's more different types of extreme aluminium shoes than I've ever seen, and I couldn't even tell you what half of them do, but I think everything is covered in there.
Yeah.
You know? Right.
Yeah.
So but that's pretty much the pattern bar shoe. It's one of those things. If you do make a good one, I don't think there's many more things as satisfying.
Yeah.
But you know, you don't need any special tools. I mean, again, if you need any tips, watch Craig Drinker's video. I made a short video on how to make it my way, which is based on Craig's, and it is so simple you won't believe it once you get it. But you've got to have to make a few duffers to get a good one. But once you've got it, you've got it. You know.
Yeah.
So, right. So moving on to the fishtail shoe. Obviously, talking about that horse I said about just now in Israel. That's the one. That's how much influence that fishtail bit at the back will have on a limb of a horse.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy really. But for those who don't know, fishtail shoe is just a shoe with the bar extended horizontally, so you're basically supporting underneath the fetlock. So we said about the pattern bar being for deep tissue flexor tendon injuries, not to be used with suspensory or superficial. This is the one you would use for suspensory or superficial. So, and again, it says there, sort of post, if you've had a horse in a cast for a long period of time because it's had a fracture of one of its legs, you do end up with that kind of atrophied muscle, flaccid tendon flaccidity. Can't even say it. You know,
say that three times fast.
I know. I can't even do it once. But yeah, so that's the shoe you would put on. And again, remember the opposite side or the other side of it, you know, you need to put a supportive shoe like a heart bar on there as well, because although that shoe's going to be doing a job, it's not going to be fully weight bearing on that limb, not until it's better.
Right.
So, but again, a really easy shoe to make, but it's got to be the right shape. I think some of these shoes, or certainly these extreme shoes, people get so focused on the fishtail part or the pattern bar part, the rest of the shoe goes out the window. It's got to fit. It's got to be a foot shape, and the fullering's got to be in the right place, and the alloys have got to be in the right place. Interestingly, with the fishtail shoe, obviously Simon Curtis, he's no longer an examiner. Simon was quite prominent in the introduction of the fishtail shoe, because like he says he was one of the first people. Simon says he's the first person he's aware of who actually ever used one. One of his bugbears is people who make them for hind feet and they quarter clip them or side clip them. Oh. He's a big believer that it needs, because all that pressure at the back, you kind of need that clip laid up the front to kind of, because he says when in his experience, and he has fitted a lot of these, he always found that the shoe detached from the foot from the front part first, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
So he said to that end, it needs a good substantial toe clip on it to stop that from happening.
Right. Yeah.
Which
that makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, I kind of had a few heated in the bar conversation with him about it. I said, yeah, but surely when you've got a horse with that sticking out the back of its foot and it's in the stable and it turns around in the stable, the shearing force is left to right must be quite immense. So if you've only got a toe clip, you're going to spin the shoe. So in the end, we agreed to disagree, and that the ideal thing would be to put a toe clip and a lateral clip to stop it from spinning.
Right.
So food for thought. But yeah, it's a shoe. It's, again, I've only ever put one on for a horse that actually needed it. I've fitted them before in practices and stuff, but that was the only horse I've ever put on. Oh, sorry, that's the only horse I've ever put one on which actually needed it, and I couldn't believe the change in that horse once I clenched it up.
That's that day, like that's immediately after shoeing it.
Yeah, that's I just clenched it up.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a very difficult horse to work on. Like I say, it got laminitis in the other foot. It had been in the cast for God knows how long. It was obviously very uncomfortable. Yeah, I've never seen anything change a horse so extremely in such. It was and us farriers, we're notorious, aren't we, for we always do a job and go, oh, we should have taken a picture before. Yep. It was one of the few occasions I went, right, I'm documenting this.
Right. Yeah.
But again, I mean, I've got a specific way of making these shoes, and again, I should be sponsored by Iron Mountain Flux, but what I do is when I make these shoes, I get the obviously appropriate section, and I will make a 3/4 fulled shoe, or even a plain stamp shoe, but with 2 reverse heel checks on it. So I'll fit the shoe to the foot. Once the shoe's fitted, I'll make the fishtail, which basically 2 little set downs, and you make that, and then I jump weld it onto the end of the shoe.
Yeah. Cool.
By doing that, I've also found once you jump weld it, if you flick where the heels were like that, and then you get it on the side, you can get very, very crisp, well forged corners where the heels go.
Right. Yeah.
But and again, I think with some videos on the YouTube channel exactly how to do that. And then what that allows you to do as well is be very precise with your measurement of how long you want the fishtail to be.
Right.
But you know, like I say, Iron Mountain, there's nothing you can't do in a coke forge or a gas forge. In fact, I did make those on site out of the gas forge whilst we were there. So
cool. For that, I think you're going to have a lot of traffic to your YouTube channel, so we should probably warn people that they have to scroll through a lot of your ASMR farrier videos where you're just carving out feet, and he does that for the views, and but if you get further down, you'll see some really cool forging.
Yeah. Oh dear. Right, so that's basically, they are the 6 actual specified shoes you've got to make for your board.
Okay.
So the rest of them, now again, like I said, you could have done, if you'd have done a graduated egg bar shoe, well, you've already ticked 2 off in one shoe, so that means you've got to make another 5. If that makes sense. It's all about numbers. As long as you've got 10 in the end, that's the main thing. So all the other shoes and variations. So the common ones, we've got, obviously, we spoke earlier about P3 fractures. Now, personally, I was always taught that if you're going to do it, and this was by the great Mark Coolwell, was you've got to put your 4 clips on, or your rim, but you also need to put a frog plate on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the number of clips, again, it depends where the fracture is, because a very common fracture is like a medial or lateral wing.
Mm-hmm.
Something I found, I mean, have you ever tried to fit a shoe with 4 clips, Brian?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Isn't it just? And then the worst thing about it is you end up then having to hammer the clips back into the hoof capsule, which, I mean, if you broke your leg and then I kicked you in the ankle, you wouldn't be too pleased, would you? So, no. So yeah, one thing I found over the years is less is more. And now, if you've got good radiology, good x-rays of where that fracture is, especially if the vet's there as well, what I sometimes do is I'll find the location of the fracture, and then like that picture there, it's got 5 on it, which is even more, but then 2 heel clips, there's one either side of the actual fracture itself.
Right.
And then I learned very, very quickly that actually, if I removed another 2 clips, so I've got like 1 side clip on one side and then 2 clips either side of the fracture, that was actually a lot better way of doing it, because I wasn't doing so much damage cutting clips out on a foot. And it was a damn sight easier to, it was a lot less impact to the horse's foot.
Mm-hmm.
But again, things are out there in the big wide world. It's moved on. Most people nowadays dealing with pedal bone fractures are just going to cast it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk a bit more about it. We move on to the modern materials segment, but I think the hoof cast, for me now, I've fixed so many problems now just with a hoof cast and maybe a shoe, especially cracks, complicated cracks. I don't use patches and polymers and stuff anymore. I just hoof cast them, and the results have been better than I've ever seen.
I've yet to put them on. I've been to one clinic on how to do it, and I'm going to another one, but I've yet to put them on. A few of my friends have, though.
Well, one of the biggest things I found, just in conversation, because I don't want to go off piece too much, but I think one of the things I found I really liked about it was the fact, because you are covering everything up with the hoof cast to a degree. So if you put a crack patch on, you've just got this big blatant crack patch on the front of the foot, and the owner can see too much of what's going on. So any slight cracks, difference where it's dried out or dirt, they're on the phone every 5 minutes or sending pictures. What do you think? What do you think? Whereas you put a hoof cast on, they can't see anything, and there's nothing, they can't panic about it. It's great.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yep. That's the one. Yeah. Brilliant. So yeah, P3 fracture shoe, clips, you could either put 3 clips on and put 2 either side of fracture, or you could put a traditional one with 4 clips on. I've seen people use 3 in the past. Again, depends on the location. Personally, I like to see them on a heart bar, but you wouldn't be a million miles out if you were just putting it on a straight bar. And remember, you don't just have to clip it like that. You can put a rim shoe on.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things. If you want to have a go at making a rim shoe, quite frankly, I'd rather pull 4 clips.
Yep, same here.
I'd rather pull 8. So that's P3 fracture shoe. Wide web shoe, with lots of different variations of a wide web shoe. It could just be a a very wide section trying to support the underside of the foot. Again, if you deep seat a shoe, you are going to make the actual web of the shoe a lot wider. Obviously for horses with like drop soles and stuff. But then there's a lot of shoes nowadays, like, so on the shoeing test part of the AWCF, it talks about, which was a bit controversial when it first came out, because it talks about a wide bar shoe, and then in brackets it said European style. So a lot of people all of a sudden thought they were pointing the finger towards the French bar shoe, or the European bar shoe as it's called in competitions, which is very wide bar with a tiny circle in the middle of the actual shoe. You wouldn't be wrong by putting one of those on, although they would be a very difficult shoe to make and fit.
No kidding.
So obviously, when in the UK we was going through the big vote to leave Europe, I came up with what I refer to as the Brexit bar shoe, which is this shoe here, which again isn't very difficult to make, but it gives you that really wide bar. So those feet we were talking about with really contracted heels and atrophied frogs, where you're trying to give it the support it needs but still support the actual where the foot's at, these drop on those really well. I mean, I've got a couple of dressage horses in them which have got very kind of like weak crushed heels, and when they are on arena surface you can physically see the heels just rocking into the surface. Put these on and they just sit pretty on top of the surface and they don't sink. But again, it's made very similar to European bar shoe, except for you're not having to draw out the centerpiece or anything. And you are literally, rather than hockey sticking it like a normal straight bar, you're just overlapping it into the corners and then forging it and controlling it. Right. So, but again, that's just like a wide bar. And again, you see these massive inserts now. You know, Jim Blurton does them, Workman do them, all these different companies do these big inserts you can weld in as well. Normally, what I tend to do with these shoes as well is I normally put either drill or punch several holes in the back of the bar, so obviously so I can lock in pressure material.
Yep.
Handy one, and you never know, you might have to put it actually on the foot on the day if you get a wide bar variant. But yeah, loads of different things. Again, wide webs, you can have a wide web inside or outside branch because you're trying to deal with a collateral ligament problem or a lateral or medial suspensory branch problem. You could put an extra wide toeing because you've got a suspensory problem.
Okay. And that actually leads to another question, and that was like, how into the flotation school of thought is the examination board? So those are things that you could put in your shoe board.
Yeah, you can do. You're seeing more and more of it now. I mean, again, a lot of the higher examiners are still practicing, well, they all are still practicing farriers. A lot of them showing some pretty high-end clientele around the UK, you know, and they are working with this stuff day in, day out. To that end, if you don't understand it, they'll be on you like a tramp on hot chips. You know what I mean? So it's yeah, you've got to understand it. I mean, and again, there's a lot of it as well, which is still up for discussion because, again, and this came up in the chat with me and Wayne, there's certain papers were released looking into this, ground reaction forces and stuff. But actually, when you, like any scientific paper, if you understand them and you can pull them apart and actually look at the amount of horses they looked at and the circumstances they looked at them, sometimes that scientific paper is not actually worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah.
And especially with collateral ligament injuries. I mean, I've had horses where if you've got a lateral collateral ligament injury, then they say put the wide branch on the affected side. But I've had horses, for whatever reason, go better when it's on the other side. But then other horses have favoured the correct side.
Right.
One thing, again, and I learned this doing a job with Mark Caldwell several years ago. When you're assessing these horses, because they can all, it's like, you know, not every suspensory horse needs a wide toe, because if it's not stabbing its toe on the arena surface, then you ain't going to make any difference because you don't need it. You just adding something extra to a foot, which he's got to carry around with it. Whereas what I learned through Mark was when you assess these horses, if you come up with a solution like I'm going to put a wide medial branch, before you shoe that horse, when you're assessing it, get some impression material, some firm impression material, and pack out that side of the foot you want to fit the wide branch.
Right.
Then have a look at the horse move again. Is it better? Is it worse? If it's worse, try the other side or try something else.
Yeah.
You know, because yes, it's a small handful of impression material, but you're not nailing it on. You're just placing it in that side of the foot for 5 minutes. You can always throw it away, and it's better to do that than to put the wrong shoe package and then find out 6 weeks later you can do something different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really important thing. You've got to understand the kind of theory behind these ground reaction force applications, but also the fact not every horse reacts the same way to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite important.
Yeah. No, I like that idea with the dim. That's a great idea.
Other shoes, which is off the syllabus, the old rocker shoes. Okay. Not a shoe you see very often now, I've got to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can remember.
These have always scared me.
Yeah. I rather stupidly, and this is the picture of the one I made. I rather stupidly put one in as a specimen at a competition in the next few weeks. But I just thought I'd not seen one in a competition for such a long time, and it just, yeah. I'm not a nasty judge, but I really didn't know what else to do. So yeah, I thought I'd have a go. But yeah, the idea of a rocker bar shoe, it's the horses with very, very severe ring bone, normally of the coffin joint. And basically we've got loss of, I mean, the coffin joint's it's a relatively low motion joint, but this shoe will just help facilitate for that lack of movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's the general idea. Normally in conjunction with a bar, so it's a rocker bar shoe. Now, someone said to me when they looked at this shoe down at the college the other day, they said, yeah, but it doesn't rock. Well, of course it's not going to rock because it's not a rocker bar shoe. You need a full 360 degree to get that kind of, I mean, do you know about the myth about rocker bar shoes?
No.
Right. So how they used to test the rocker bar shoe to see if it was any good was when you finished it, if you could push one side of it down on your anvil and let it go, it's supposed to rock for as long as possible.
Okay.
It was just one of those things.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure Craig Trinker would love it. But, you know, it's one of those shoes. People don't generally use them as much these days. I might be wrong, but I don't think I've ever put one on in battle. But, you know, it's something you could put in. Again, you've got to understand the function, what it's there to do for. To be honest, I don't think when you look at some of the old textbooks and some dried out bones in museum, you see horses with joint diseases, which look like something out of the Elephant Man, you know,
Yeah.
all this new bone growth. That was when we used to have working horses and they were just worked within an inch of their lives. We don't see that in the pet animals we have these days.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not a horse out there which doesn't need a rocker bar, but they're not a common package we put on horses these days.
Okay. Yeah.
Not for us average farriers anyway. So, yeah, but it's a shoe. It's there. It's on the list if you wanted to put it on. You know, it's but it's a great forging test.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you ever want to get on point with your forging, have a go at making one.
Yeah, no kidding.
Interference shoes. So interference shoes are still on the list. So any kind of preventer from, you know, back feet hitting front feet hitting back limbs, left feet hitting front feet diagonal, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, certain disciplines like pacers and things like that have quite a few different weighted and interference type shoes. Your average working horses these days, you don't see them so much. But again, you can build like an interference shoes. You can build it into an egg bar. You can build it into a straight bar. To help alleviate a problem, or you could just hand it in as a separate shoe, as part of your 10. But anti-interference shoes are, credible associate shoes. What I would think I would be looking at, though, rather than just making a speedy cutter shoe or a hind preventer shoe, I'd be looking at, trying to incorporate things into that shoe build, which says that you're trying to perhaps make the limb fly straighter. So obviously that shoe in that picture there, we've got a hind preventer, but it's got a big lateral trailer to try and stabilize the hot, have a straighter foot flight, so we're not crossing the midline and interfering with itself or widening its stance, etc. It's about putting those little nuggets of information and skill in there to show that you understand it. Side bone shoes, again, they're on the list. Like I said earlier, side bone shoes, a classic one. The shape's got to be right. People love the side bone shoe because they are relatively easy to make and they can look really, really pretty.
Yeah, they make you feel like a pro.
Yes, absolutely. But remember, that's a unilateral side bone shoe. Bilateral side bone is a bit different. You've got both sides. The foot's completely locked up. Like I said earlier, you're probably looking at either putting a bar shoe or some kind of elevation in there to try and unload that middle part of the foot and cause, keep the structural rigidity within it. Whereas a unilateral side bone shoe, we've got that textbook simulated wear pattern on the outside to allow the horse, again, if you've shot any horses with this condition, they will wear the shoes out very similar to that pattern to make themselves comfortable. So we're just taking that away from them. Again, remember, when you now hold that side, rasp your now heads off so it's flush with the shoe if you put one on the foot. But it's got to be the right shape.
Yeah, and that shape is that early quarter, right, on the lateral side.
And then straight back. And again, remember, with these shoes, because for want of a better word, it is a lateral extension. And what we're trying to do with any kind of lateral extension is support where the foot is, but also give the outside border needs to provide a symmetry to where the foot should be.
Yeah.
So, you see some people, they make these side bone shoes like that, but then when they bash down the outside border and spread the material, they then check it back up 2 inch again. Well, actually, you kind of want that extra width there to achieve the heel fit with the expansion. Yeah, exactly. So, it's a common shoe. People make them. I mean, I'd say it's such an easy shoe to make, but you're by putting the right shape in, you're showing that you understand that shoe and you've dealt with it.
Yeah.
That's really important. Extensions in general, I mean, there's all kinds of extensions. You can have a full extension which comes out from the toe like a toe extension and then go back. So if it comes out from the toe at 1/2 inch, it goes all the way around at 1/2 inch. You've got the gradual extensions which sort of start to come out from the toe, travels back but gradually gets wider. What we see a lot of, which people class as lateral extensions, are in fact lateral heel extensions, because you're coming out from the quarter then staying out. That's a heel extension. It's not a full extension, that's a heel extension. Obviously you can have medial extensions. Medial extensions, obviously you run the risk of the horse doing like Boadicea's chariot and chopping its other leg off. So obviously caution, but you to a degree though it can be done, but you've kind of got to bevel it a little bit like a bevel shoe, but you can only do a certain amount before it becomes dangerous.
It hurts a knife.
Yeah, so you've got to be sensible with it. Funny enough, one way around that, and it was I was shoeing this week actually on the yard, and I bumped into my good friend Mark Watson, who actually was fitting medial extensions on this horse. But you know what he was doing it was building up on top of that with acrylics.
Right. Yep.
You know what I mean? So it was acting a bit like a gum shield, if you like, and so it wasn't going to have a mishap. But you know, it needed that support. So you've got to come up with some form of compromise, haven't you?
Right. Yeah.
But again, with all these modern acrylics we've got, you know, that is a very, very valid option of getting around that.
For sure.
So, but yeah, all kinds of extensions. I mean, and again, you can incorporate those extensions into a bar shoe, an open heel shoe. It's entirely, you know, it's one of those things. Yeah, it's. I mean, and again, you've got toe extensions. So if you do a lot of young stock and you want to put like a toe extension in, you know, but again, the key thing is understanding the impacts, you know, and I think you sometimes see some of these big toe extensions on shoes, sort of like lateral toe extension. You've got to understand the impacts that's going to have on the way that limb moves. And I've seen a few people in the past, many years ago, trying to straighten up horses' legs by putting like lateral toe extensions on, which is the horse was breaking over on the outside toe. So they put a massive extension in there to force it straight. And guess what happened? The horse goes and breaks down because the horse's legs moving that way for a reason.
Yeah. Yep.
Funny enough, it's in the same direction of its knee. You know, most of us farriers are relatively godlike, but we can't fix everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. So, so extensions, again, key thing is with an extension, everything is in the right shape. That shoe's the right shape. And the extension, remember, once you start to come out, you stay out.
Well, one thing, could you give an example where it would be a good idea to do that full toe extension, like starting there?
What, the full toe extension?
Like, sorry, the full extension where you've got it extended out, like you said, most of them do break over that way, or most do.
I think sometimes them full toe extensions, for me, it's never really something I would put on a front foot.
Right.
Okay. It's more something I would put on a hind foot, either because of, you know, conformationally, the horse is like, you know, it's completely crushed its outside,
right,
all the way around to the toe. Sometimes even the horse just completely broke its hind foot away. You know, sometimes you get these horses which only have fronts on. They've tried to keep the backs barefoot, and it's just absolutely emaciated. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do, just to kind of fill the gap for where the foot should be. Sometimes in some spavinning cases, you know, by coming out from that toe, giving it like that extension all the way around, you know, you're just kind of trying to keep the foot moving in as straight as way as possible, giving it the extension all the way around to the back to stabilize the hock and to try and keep that horse moving in sort of like the direction of travel, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, some of the ones you do see, though, I mean, especially on front limbs, I do question, I mean, where that originally came from, probably because it looked good as a specimen in the competition, and it's found its way into popular farrier folklore, you know?
Yeah.
You do get a lot of that. But again, one of the other things with lateral extensions is a bugbear of mine, but again, this came up with the last associate exam, with the actual practical exam on the foot. If you're fitting with width and length, make sure you box that shoe off to where it fits. Don't leave half a ton of flat steel and just take the edge off it. You know, at the end of the day, by doing that, you are showing the examiner where that shoe fits to.
Right.
You know, what it is, we've all got really, really lazy. Ever since Mr. Bowder invented the spinny Bowder thing, and we all got them in our vans, we forgot how to use, well, we basically forgot where the on button on our rasps were.
Yep.
Okay. And it's one of the things I see it with diploma students. I see it with everyone that, you know, when we're doing these exams, we can't use power tools, you know, so we best learn to use a rasp. Trying to rasp Trying to box off a shoe cold with an old foot rasp isn't going to do anything. It's going to suck up a load of time. Get it hot, hammer box it first, and get it hot and get your rasp on there and do it properly. But boxing off is really important because it does show the examiner where you're fitting that shoe to.
Mm-hmm. Now, maybe this is a good time to bring that up. How much of that is up for interpretation? Or maybe this is already in your talk, but as far as heel fit, is it basically, well, this horse is going to be used, this will be a warm blood foot that's going to expand quite a bit in the shoeing cycle. So I fit it this wide with a little bit of flat steel to accommodate that. Like, how do you,
what
are they looking for?
The key thing with that, I mean, that's what comes up in the oral. I mean, they're not going to, I mean, there's certain types of shoes. I mean, let's say you put a bar shoe on there and it was really, really tight in the bar, and the examiner went, that's a bit tight in the bar. What they probably do is then talk to you in the oral about it and kind of question that shape.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to mark you down it when they mark the board, purely and simply because it's functional. You may have made it for a foot with tight heels. And funny enough, when they ask you that in your oral and you go, well, I made it for a client of mine's horse, it's very, very narrow in the back of the foot, blah, 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 blah. And you kind of, you're not arguing your point, but you're putting your views across and you're backing it up.
Right. Yep.
You won't get marked down for it. But again, it's different parts of different environments cause different shaped feet, don't they?
Yeah.
Again,
yeah, for sure.
We've spoke about it before. You go to the drier parts of the United States of America where the frogs live, where frogs are supposed to live, and you come to England, it looks like it's trodden on a landmine. It's all to do with moisture content and everything and environment and stuff. So there's a lot of room for maneuver when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, that's why there is an oral there for you to kind of like explain why you did it that way.
Right. Yeah.
So, lastly, different bar shoe variants. There's loads of things you can do to a normal bar shoe. Obviously, you put the bar shoe in at first place because you wanted to stabilize the hoof capsule. Sometimes you need to set the bar down. Sometimes you need to set the bar up. You can make it omnidirectional. You could put a roll toe, you could put an equilibrium toe, you could put a rocker toe on it. There's so many different variations of bar shoes you could do. Clip position, types of fullering, deep seated, cut the inside border out to allow it to sink into the ground. There's lots of different stuff you can do. So, and these are all the different types of shoes you want to be putting on your board. Preferably stuff you've used or stuff you can talk about.
Right.
That's don't make a boring board where everything's just you've ticked all the boxes but there's nothing really to kind of question you on or talk about. It's a bit harder to do that with the AW because there's these stipulated, but I have had comments in the past with diploma students. But I've told them keep it simple, and they've literally kept it simple. And the examiners
Too simple.
Well, there wasn't a lot to talk about. So it's what it is, So lastly, just a bit on the board itself, because this is one of those things. Okay, regardless of what you might be told by anyone on this planet, that piece of wood does not get assessed. It is just there its whole function is to stick your shoes on. Okay. No one's going to give you a mark because it's 200 years aged oak. Okay. It was part of the Mary Rose battleship or anything like that. Nobody cares. It's a piece of wood. Okay. You can make it out of an old pallet if you want. No one cares. And again, it doesn't matter how fancy the piece of wood is. It will not make your shoes look any better. If your shoes are not to standard, the examiners will see that because they're going to pick them off and take them off the board.
Right.
Okay. It must be portable because you're going to have to pick it up and carry it on your oral. Okay. Because you have to walk in the room with it, carrying it. Okay. So it's got to be portable. On the diploma exam, now whether this eventually comes out into the higher exams, I don't know. On the diploma exam, they've actually stipulated that boards cannot be any more than 1 meter by 1 meter or any thicker than 15 mil, because some of the students were spending more time varnishing their piece of wood than they were making the actual shoes.
Right.
And when they went to do their orals, if we had a strong wind, as they walked out the forge to go into the classroom and they were carrying it, they were so big, they were nearly taken off. And then all the shoes would fall off onto the road. And of course, me being unhelpful, I weren't going to help them. But, you know, it was causing problems. So they actually stipulated the size. The piece of wood is not important. Okay. It's as long as it's got, all you want is 10 hooks on a piece of wood, preferably, you know, those little sort of like ring screws you get where you hang pictures up.
Yep.
With 10 of those with the nail in it. So if you put the nail you want in that shoe, the examiner's not going to just pick up a random nail and try it in your shoe. You're saying, I've made it for this nail.
Right.
This nail fits.
Yeah.
Okay, so you take away the grey areas. That is all you, and obviously the board, once you've registered for your exam and you get given a candidate number, it must have your candidate number on it, but no other. It must be complete. You can't have your name on it or any indication of who you are.
Okay.
So when you do yours, Brian, if you were to come over here, we do not want to see a big maple leaf on it because they'll work out who you are. You know, it's
there,
really,
bud.
but yeah, it's got to be completely anonymous. And the other thing as well is any of your shoes you're making on there or your board itself, do not post any pictures on social media until the final results have been received.
Right.
Because, you know, that's just one of those things. And they don't like it because you've got to be anonymous. You can't then post a picture of your shoe board. Let's face it, most of us farriers who are on social media, we all follow each other. And the last thing you want as an examiner is to be going somewhere, driving down, you look at your phone, oh, that's the shoe board I'm going to be looking at later. Now I know who it belongs to.
Right.
You know, it's like, yeah, it's that kind of thing. You know, and again, the worshipful company, but you know, as far as the examination itself and the finished products, they are very strict on sort of no photography anyway.
Okay.
I mean, once you've got your results and you've passed, yeah, by all means, post a picture of your shoe board. No one's going to say anything negative about it. We're all going to pass judgment. But,
no, yeah, of course.
It'll all get screenshot and shared in the WhatsApp group. You know what farriers are like.
Oh yeah.
So that's pretty much it for the shoe board. Which,
cool.
Yeah,
that's a lot. That's helpful.
Yeah, which I hope dispelled a few myths because it's a lot of ways it's not that hard, but again, it's just having the right information and actually not wasting time making things you don't need to make.
Yeah, for sure. Well, do you want to get into the modern materials?
Right. Okay. So
that?
The synthetic farrier part. So that will always take place when you do your practical module. You are normally given an hour to complete it. What will happen is they will present you with a morbid specimen, obviously a dead horse's leg. So if you are a vegan, this exam is not for you. So yeah, a defrosted lower limb of a horse. Now, the feet have been sized off from 5 1/4 inch wide to 5 1/2 inch wide.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because it specifies that.
That was brought in a few years ago because obviously when the modern materials phase first went in, we had some glue and we had a few procedures like make a hole in a horse's foot. But as time's gone on, the modern materials element of it has got, we've got glue on shoes, we can glue on aluminium shoes, we've got all these different types of crack patch with so many different variants. We've got the imprint shoes, with so much stuff at our fingertips, all to do the same kind of job, depending on the foot or the way we like to do it. So guys were turning up, they'd literally turn up with like the whole horseshoe and supplies sort of crammed in the back of their truck. And that's a lot of money to be spending on stuff you probably ain't going to use. So,
Right. Yeah.
So not only have you got all this stuff you might not use, you've got it in every single size as well. So obviously what they've done is they've tried to bring the shoe sizes to a kind of point where you're going to need a 2 or maybe a 3. You don't need 4s, 6s, 1s, and all that stuff. I mean, it's quite interesting because obviously bit of a funny story on it. So obviously, because I run the exams, I have to go to the abattoir and pick up the legs.
One of the perks of the job.
Well, yeah, we'll cut along. It's not far from where I live. And cut a long story short, it's the abattoir itself is in the centre of a car scrapyard, which is part of the big gypsy campsite.
Okay.
And if you've ever seen the film Snatch, it's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Well, if you ever come over, I'll take you. You won't want to go back. So you go to this place and he's got big oil drums full of dead horses' legs where he's cut them off. And there's no washing facilities there. So you have to kind of manhandle these legs and measure them, get them to size, chuck them in the back of the truck. So then I drive home with dirty hands, and I'm trying to drive home. It's about 30 minutes from the house. I'm trying not to touch my face or pick my nose or chew my finger. It's a nightmare. So you get home, scrub yourself. Now, them legs have got to sit in the back of my van to the next day when I travel down to Hereford to put them in the freezer. So that journey for 2.5 hours is quite pleasant, as you can imagine.
Yep.
As it was, and then I had to prep all the legs up. And there is a moral to this story as well. But I had to prep all the legs up. Some of them needed a bit of a trim up. Some of them just needed cleaning. Wrap them up into what I'd normally do is get some bin bags, wrap the limb in the bin bag. So, and then tape it up, then put it in the freezer. And then the day before the exam, we get them back out of the freezer. We allow them to defrost. The last associate exams. So I did all that on the Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday is the theory day of the AW exam. Come the Thursday morning, and I was starting to feel a bit funny on the Wednesday. I'm not gonna lie. Come the Thursday, I'm feeling rough. I've got a funny sort of white colour. I'm visiting the lavatory a lot, and I'm not feeling too good. To the point on the Thursday evening, me and one of my bosses were supposed to be going out for dinner with the examiners because it's what we do. I had to cancel, and I was literally in the bathroom roughly every 15 minutes throughout the night.
Oh.
I ended up missing the fellowship part of the day because I had to go home, and I was quite worried that it's a 2.5 hour journey home, and I didn't think I was going to make it home, so I did sit on a plastic bag just in case. I did make it home, but anyway, the moral of the story is, and it's quite a serious one because we do, especially when it comes to modern materials, we do use dead horses' legs a lot for practicing this stuff with and for the exam. Make sure you wear gloves, make sure you wash your hands, because I actually ended up with a very, very bad bout of gastroenteritis, and I haven't been that ill for many years.
Ugh.
It was not good. Yeah, I don't actually think I ate any food from the Wednesday through to the Sunday evening, which I wouldn't wish that on anyone. It was not nice.
Oh, a pretty good instant weight loss program.
Yeah, but then I soon put it back on. It's all or nothing. But so just be very careful with when you are practicing with dead legs. And just another thing on dead legs, because people, if they are going to do the exam, they are going to get hold of some legs and they are going to practice their modern materials on it. Just be careful what videos you put on social media having fun with dead animal legs. I see stuff all the time, and I can see the value in it, but in this weird, I don't want to say snowflake sort of woke kind of world we live in, I can only imagine. I've seen a few videos go viral and be very damaging to people over the last couple of years, especially when you start involving animals and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, the intent was not to do what these people are trying to make out that they are trying to do.
Yep. Yeah.
And, you know, it's been very, very damaging to people. I can only imagine what it'll be like if one of these kind of like very, very anti-animal cruelty people did get a hold of someone with a horse's dead leg trying to smash its hoof capsule off or something.
Right. Yeah.
You know, for us, there's a lot of education in that. But it's about perception, isn't it?
Yeah. Optics. Yep.
I mean, because we had that thing in the UK where one of the racehorse trainers, a video got out of him sat astride a dead horse, which had been put to sleep. And that got out into the kind of mainstream social media, and it damn near kind of like destroyed. He lost his license over it, a massive fine. Just, yeah, it's something just people just need to be aware of. And I'd hate to see anyone go down that route where they were just not even having fun, but they're trying to prove the point about how strong a hoof capsule was or something, you know. And,
Yep.
you know, anyway, yeah, keep it for the clinic. Doesn't need to go on Facebook. So yeah, but the modern material, it's one of those things, and again, it can be a bit vague on the website at the moment because it is constantly evolving. Recently, they increased the list of potential procedures to involve hoof casts. We spoke about hoof cast earlier.
Yeah, I noticed that.
The last lot of exams, they did have to use a hoof cast as part of it. I think they had to remove a part of the, obviously what they tend to do is they will either mark or burn onto a hoof. If you've got to cut a hole out or do a resection, the vet will mark on there where he wants you to remove it. Because what you normally get is like two tasks. So it'd be prepare a horse's foot for the removal of the keratoma. And then the second part will be glue a shoe on to support the horse in the aftercare, or put this one last time was remove a window for a keratoma and then put on a hoof cast to protect it, but you can still treat behind it. So it was like, yeah, you kind of left the window there with a bit of hoof cast up so you can get behind and treat it still. So but other things which may come up, obviously looking for an abscess, that's on there. I mean, that's simple, but it's on there. You know, I think when I did mine, and again, when I did mine, it was back in the day where there wasn't a lot of things they could do other than a dorsal wall resection. They drew on a foot where they'd followed a track to, and I had to dig it from the side in to kind of relieve the pressure on it. So that kind of stuff. Actual hoof wall resections themselves, you know, for the dorsal wall, it could be for anything, but, you know, dorsal hoof wall resection for laminitis, for example, removing a piece for keratoma, hoof wall repairs and extension, you know, when you've got these horses like with seedy toe, white line disease, excavating that area, rebuilding it, building extensions. So you've got a horse, a bit like a foal extension, but obviously it's not on a foal's foot, but, you know, putting them kind of extensions on with glues and stuff. Cracks. Now, if you have a crack, you can use whatever material you want to use to fix the problem. They're not going to say, we want you to use wire and screws. No, that's your choice.
Okay.
If you want to use a patch, if you want to use sort of thermoplastics, if you want to, you know, that's your choice. Again, with the hoof cast is now part of it. Whether you use hoof cast or not, it's entirely up to you as well. And gluing on shoes. So that can be, not that many people would glue a steel shoe on, but I suppose there's cases where you would. But, you know, when you do have to glue a shoe on, it's normally your choice of shoes as well. So if you've got a load of aluminium, you feel better doing it with an aluminium or a composite shoe or something, that's your choice. But as long as it's got a shoe glued on so the horse can do the job it needs to do.
Right.
What I will say is this probably will evolve a bit more in the next couple of years. And I think one of the things when you actually go through the syllabus and it's on about the uses of pads and packers and stuff, that probably will end up at some point being brought into the exam. I don't know quite how they will do it yet, but they'll do it in conjunction with something.
Okay.
So again, knowing your different sort of shore rates, what's too hard, what's too soft, what works best in what environment, that's all going to start coming into play eventually as well. So know your products.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but and that's pretty much it for the modern materials. I mean, it's an hour long. The key thing as well is that when you do it, especially with the modern materials, the health and safety side of it's very important. If you're dremeling, if you're using hoof grinders or anything like that, make sure you wear a dust mask. Okay. If you're dealing with stuff, safety glasses, all that kind of stuff, it's something they will check. And whilst you're carrying out that procedure, the examiners will walk around and ask you questions. Why are you doing that? What would you do if this was to happen? They will ask you sort of questions. So, don't just block yourself up and ignore them. That's part of it.
Okay.
So,
and then you, as the candidate, you have to provide the glue, the casting, you just bring everything you kind of can.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I dare say, it depends how much you use the stuff. I mean, in my business now, apart from dental impression material, I don't use a lot of stuff. But if I was going to do the exam, especially if I was going to another country to do it, I think finding a supplier who perhaps you could buy X amount of aluminium bar shoes, different types of glue, all that stuff, but maybe get it on a kind of if I
pay
don't
for
use
what
it,
you use,
sort of like a sale return thing. And I dare say there's probably a few of these suppliers out there who are prepared to do that because it'd be a good business.
For sure.
It's but yeah, I mean, I've seen some people turn up for that exam with so much stuff. It's like they're going to set a stall up and start selling the stuff, But yeah, it's I say, but there's so much good stuff. But again, don't just buy it if you've not used it. I mean, I'm not going to name drop anything here, but I got some a brand of aluminium heart bars the other week, and I just happened to have this pair of these shoes, and I thought, I got them in the van. They've been in there a while. I've never used them. I thought I might try and use them, and when I actually got to trying to fit them, and now I ended up having to take them off and sort of put them in the scrap bin and find something else which worked, because it was just they just did not. I just could not work them. There was just, I couldn't get them to fit.
Yep.
You don't want to do that. Take what you've used before, practice with. Don't just try it on the day.
Yeah. Things can go very wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, and again, for the sort of further learning, which, I mean, if you've got an abattoir near you, get some feet, practice on those feet, and then afterwards, get hold of some chat a vet up, get some scalpels and stuff, and the limbs before you dispose of them, have a dissection.
Oh yeah.
I haven't done it for a while, but there's been a few times over my career where I've had access to scalpel blades and the horse's legs and some spare time, and I've just on my own just cut them up like some kind of serial killer. I've got all Hannibal Lecter on it, but it's it's just such good revision, stripping them legs right out. Yep. And just finding just reaffirming where everything actually does originate and attach to. It's just because it always looks different in real life and it does in the textbooks, and we don't very often get to see what's inside there.
Yeah.
It's just
You'll learn something every time.
Absolutely, and just make the most out of them, And again, if you've got them and you've got a local horsey scene who are interested, go and do a talk on it. Cut one up in front of them if they want, unless they're vegans, but cut one up in front of them, because that will grow your confidence in knowledge as well.
Right. So we kind of jump all over because of the way I'm asking the questions. Oh, actually, before we leave this, one of the things I saw and made a note on was degreasing. Is that just like how you prep the foot for applying glue, or is that okay? I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a lost in translation.
No. Degreasing, it's just like, when you put surgical spirits or any kind of degrease on there, just because, a lot of these glues, they just stick to the first thing they touch. And if that's grease or water and that, it's not going to stick to the foot. So,
right.
That's all that is.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, I had been taught forever to use brake cleaner with non-chlorinated brake cleaner. And then I saw several clinics in a row where they just used a torch, just a little butane torch, and that was the process. That was it. So I've never actually heard of the surgical stuff you're talking about, but yeah, okay. I just wanted to clear that up.
No, I was going to say, there's loads of different ways. I mean, the heat gun way is a really good way of doing it.
Yeah,
and you're warming it so it sort of cures a lot quicker as well.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, should we step into the actual practical exam then? Like the shoeing the horse?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of kind of myth around this particular process.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think so again, if you've done your diploma, it's based on the diploma in the sense you're going to do a side of the horse, a front and a hind, and you're going to have 2 hours to do it. And your foot trim is going to get marked, your shoemaking is going to get marked, your fit of the shoe is going to get marked, and your nail and attachment is going to get marked. Once you've been allocated the horses, you'll go outside and there'll be a trot up. Now, if you look on the website, there is a list of the shoes and variants that you will do on the practical test. Now, so basically the exam used to be many years ago, but it could be one of many shoes. I think when I did mine, it was one would be a bar shoe and the other one could be anything else.
Right.
So it could be a bar shoe or it could be an open heel lateral extension. And I think on my one, it was a 3/4 full and straight bar shoe and a open heel lateral extension, but it was very descriptive of how they wanted the extension. That, funny enough, what we were talking about earlier, that was 1/2 inch from the toe all the way back.
Okay.
So it was very clear and concise what they wanted. But so it was decided a few years ago now, that both shoes would be a bar shoe of descriptions.
Right.
So what they've done is there's a list, and it's on the website, and it's split into 2 groups. So, and these groups are groups of variants, what that shoe could entail. So both front and hind is going to be a bar shoe, but you've got to pick in both shoes one of the group A variants, or at least one of the group A variants, and one of the shoes has got to have one of the group B variants. So group A variants, so you've got, and I think sometimes where people do get confused is some of the classifications of what they put on there, because what we call an equilibrium toe, they've called a ground safe toe, brackets a multi-directional toe, but what they're actually on about is an equilibrium toe. But an
Okay.
equilibrium toe is a trademark of Mustad, just saying. So there's Group A variants. First one's the set away bar. Basically a set down bar. You've got to put a bar shoe on. It's got a prominent frog. You don't want it to sit on the frog, so you just set the bar down a little bit. Okay.
Right.
Quite not nice, simple. It depends on the type of foot you're shoeing. You know, unfortunately, us in England, we do have these kind of very prominent frogs because of the lovely weather we have. Then we've got the ground safe multi-directional toe or equilibrium toe. Then there's a roll toe. Obviously, when they say roll toe, that's just the toe's just been safed off to help it. Not as extreme as the equilibrium toe, but you know, it's just got a bit of a rock to it. Then we've got the set toe. Obviously, a set toe is probably going to be on a hind foot where we set the toe up to accommodate for dragging its toe. Rocker toe. Obviously, again, that gets a bit of confusion because what a rocker toe is what we use in all of our old textbooks when they go on about a roll toe, where the toe actually rolls up at the front. That's what we now call a rocker toe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. A roll toe's where the ground surface of the shoe's got a roll to it, and a rocker toe is where the foot surface of the shoe has got a slight rock into it. They're the definitions. And then other variants we've got in Group A: toe clip, quarter clip, includes side clips, a set down bar. So that's where the bar's been set down away from the ground.
Right.
There's not many reasons.
Away from the foot or away from the ground?
Away from the ground.
Oh, okay.
A set away bar is where you're setting it away from the frog.
Okay.
A set down bar is what they're saying. And there are little descriptors underneath this on the list. So it's important, if anyone's thinking of doing it, you look at the list. And then lastly, side clips. So they're Group A. So both of your shoes it's got to be a bar shoe with one of those variables in it. At least one. I mean, you could have a set down bar and side clips, so you've got two in it. No extra points for you, but you've got to tick them. It's part of your shoeing plan. There you Group A. So Group B, in an ideal world, the horses which come in, you know, if you look at them horses hard enough, you'll find one of those Group B variants which is going to suit one of the feet more than something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's going to need a bit of extra lateral support. It could do with a bit of elevation to the heels because it's quite low, you know. So a lot of it is you need to find something so you can tell the examiners what you're doing and why. You know, but in the past, there have been the examiners have told you, we want you to put that variant on. But again, the shoeing plan now is they're asking for you to look at the horse. You need to put one of these variants on, but what's going to do that horse the best?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. See,
Right, so
there's been a lot of confusion about that because I think
yeah,
people are going off of the old where they dictated
exactly.
it to you.
I mean, and I did speak to the chairman of the exam committee about this just to get a bit of clarification.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
so with the Group B, you've got variants like deep seated, so proper deep seated. So if you've got a really flat foot, medial lift, a lateral lift, so they're heel elevations to kind of make the foot a bit more balanced. But again, if you look down your foot and it was very laterally high and you didn't think that even with your foot trim you can make that level, you might just want to, you know. And when we have a medial or a lateral lift, we're not talking half an inch higher. It could be just a few millimeters.
Okay.
You know, depends on the horse. So, but you've got your lifts, then you've got medial extensions, lateral extensions. Obviously, they can be full, gradual, or just at the heel. One of the most common ones I see is a lateral heel extension on a hind shoe, and that's normally people doing like a whip across bar shoe, which for me, if I could, I'd go for one of those because they do look nice, and if you know how to make them well and fit them and build them for a foot, you can do a really nice job. Some people just don't quite get it right, and then an ugly one, a really nice looking one looks beautiful, an ugly one looks just ugly.
Yeah, sticks
You
out,
know,
so to
yeah.
speak.
So yeah, so they're your extensions. Then you can have a graduated. Obviously, graduated normally probably sort of twice as much in the heel as you got in the toe. That kind of, sort of graduation, you know, sort of like raised heel, rolled toe kind of a thing. Funny enough, when the old AW course at Stoney, I used to, when someone else ran it, they used to get different tutors in each month to teach different shoes. And I used to always end up having to go and teach the graduated bar shoe. And I used to always call it the shit sandwich shoe, because out of all the bar shoes, it's the hardest one to look nice. But yeah, you just got to make it functional. And then last one, which have changed the name again, is they just call it the extra broad bar.
Right.
It was wide bar, brackets European, but now it's just extra broad bar, width accommodates low heels, it says. And that's what I refer to as the Brexit bar shoe.
And you've already copyrighted that, so they can't use it in the exam.
Yes, exactly. They can't use the Brexit bar shoe. You know, again, you can put a Group B variant on both your shoes if you're mental, but you know, so you need both shoes got to have one of the Group A variants. One of the shoes must have a Group B variant.
Okay.
You know, and you need to find one of the feet which is going to suit that to your advantage and the horse's advantage. You know, you don't want to be that guy who can't figure it out and then have the examiners tell you, because I don't even know if they would tell you. You know, it's
right.
But it should be quite honest. I know there might be times where you want to put a lateral extension on it, but the horse obviously needs someone else. The examiners might guide you to go down the correct path, because, you know, at the end of the day, you've got horse welfare here as well. Although,
so what we were just hitting on the last of the, how crazy it would be to do both, and that how the examiners would kind of lead you in the right direction potentially. If
and
take a hint.
Yeah, that's right.
Is what you were
saying.
saying.
Yeah, and exactly, when you go and do the trot up, and again, remember, when you do the trot up before and after the exam, same as the diploma exam, on that discussion, you are not being examined.
Okay.
You know, the trot up is for the vet to ensure that the horse is sound before and after. Obviously, if it's lame when you finish because you've made it lame, that's an automatic fail.
Right.
But, you know, that conversation with what you've decided to put on the horse as your variant, you know, if you are going down the wrong avenue, the examiners will probably try to steer you a bit.
Okay.
You know, if that horse is glaringly asking for a graduated bar shoe, but you don't want to make a graduated bar shoe, you can't hide from it. You've got to do what it needs, you know.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
So, you know, and it's that simple. I mean, the biggest thing I see in the last few exams is people doing the exam who are not prepared. They've not got the exam preparation there, you know. Yes, you can use template again, like the diploma, you can use template shoes. So if you've made a load of bar shoes with different sizes on, you can use those shoes to gauge your size. And to be honest, with the associate, yes, you've got to be able to understand the ruler to make sure you've got, you know, because you might have to tweak things a bit, but templates will give you a good ballpark figure of how much steel you're going to require to do that job.
Yeah, no kidding.
Templates are a big must, really. But what I would say as well is, with a template, if you've got a load of straight bar templates, the way I see it, if you put a template on that foot and that's the right size, if you imagine that variant you're adding to it, be it an extension or a graduation, and trying to calculate what extra you're going to need to kind of get that, it's a great way of steering you in the right direction. You know, the thing is, if with graduations, for example, section choice is really, really important. So if I was doing a graduated bar shoe, rather than putting inch by 3/8 or 3/8 by 1, as you call it, I'd straight away I'd be going for 1/2 inch, jumping the back part a little bit, then drawing down the front part. And what you tend to get is with a graduated shoe, when you go up a section, is what you lose by jumping, you gain by drawing. So if it was a 16-inch bar shoe with inch 3/8, if you go inch by 1/2, jump the back part, draw the front part, you're probably going to end up around about the same.
Right.
You know, and again, it's practice. I mean, with doing the job I do now with teaching associates, the way I because of my sort of competition background, the way I efficiently make bar shoes for competitions, because there's a pattern we're copying, what I tend to do now, because of the exam, is I tend to make more things on the straight and get my ruler on it. So if you think about it, if it's going to be a 13-inch shoe, by the time you put your hockey sticks on it and then stick your ruler down it, it should be a 13-inch piece of steel with 2 hockey sticks on the end. Same with the lateral extension whip across bar shoes. By the time you put your whip across on, you jumped up your outside, stick your ruler down it, that should be the measurement of the shoe needed for that foot, because you've already set the bars up. So there's loads, and there's different ways work for different people. But again, I've been messing around trying to find ways to teach people who maybe haven't got that kind of creative forging eye, you know. So there's loads of different ways, but you just got to simplify it to what works to your advantage, you know.
All right. The main thing is in practicing for this, it's just like all the other exams, it's a process. And by making those shoes over and over again, you're going to get your measurements. Like, you'll know
well, exactly. And all those practice shoes, don't keep making the same size one. Make lots of different sizes and write on them what size was, and take them to the exam with you. And it, you know, the fullering might be in the wrong place, the nail holes might not be in the right place, but it's still a template of that measurement, and you've just got to not make that same mistake this time, you know. So
yeah, it's
the practice, you know, keep your practice shoes, use them as templates, you know. But again, the key thing is people not getting done in the time because they've not got that exam process nailed down, and they start wasting time. Knowing when to stop and start again, especially in the early stage, is really, really important. Because, and this is where, when you build that shoe, and I teach AW and diploma techniques very, very differently. Like when I'm doing diploma teaching, I get them to use the templates and measure the shoe, trust their measurements, but don't go over to the foot until that shoe's clipped, as long as the ruler's correct, and then burn your clip in, fit your shoe, rather than wasting time going backwards and forwards with not completed shoes. Whereas with the associate, as soon as you've got your shoe welded and forged, before you start fullering it and nail holing it and clipping it, get it in your tongs, go over to the foot, hover it over the foot, and see how you're doing for size. Because at that point, you've got options. Do I fuller it hard? Do I fuller it not quite to full depth and stamp it more? Do I run my branches up and over hem it? Do I not hem it and try and take it off with a rasp? Because, you know, how much material am I plus or minus? If you are just a little bit too big, but you can't soak it up with creative rasping, shall we say, then a great trick, and this again goes back to how wonderful Iron Mountain Flux is, I do want some kind of endorsement, is if you've got a good sharp cutter and you go down the center of your bar and cut out like a 1/4 inch sliver through your frog clip, overlap it again, weld it again, you will lose that extra steel. You'd be surprised how much steel you will lose by cutting a sliver out and re-welding it. And then that's just saved you going through that process from scratch.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, people get to the point where they try and fix something which is not fixable, you know, and I say that's the biggest lesson I've ever learned in my whole career. And that was exactly what happened to me when I did my associate exam. Was I went over to the foot, I thought, I'm going to have to stretch this one quite a bit. So I followed it. Rather than just stop and start again, I followed it. I followed all the way back to the hills. I followed it deep. I ran the branch, hemmed the branches right up. You know, I worked the back of the bar down a bit more. I hammer boxed it, went back over to the foot to get the clip in. Still too small. Got someone on a flatter and a sledgehammer, stretched out a bit more. And all this time, the clock's still ticking.
Yeah, right.
And I got to the point where you get that sinking feeling and you go, this ain't ever going to fit.
Yeah.
I need to start again. So get your striker, cut me some more steel. You know you didn't have enough last time, so just add a half an inch or whatever. Anyway, so he did that, gave me this new bit of steel. How much time have I got left? 45 minutes. So I had to obviously start again, 3/4 full of straight bar with a toe clip, 45 minutes left on the clock. I did get there.
It's amazing what adrenaline can do.
Well, when that skill set is that drilled into you, you basically just have to close your eyes and accept the pain, don't you? And that's what kicked in at that point. And I will say I did finish 5 minutes early as well.
Wow.
And I got an A. But that's another story. But no, that's a true story and I can prove it. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Now, not everybody, I mean, at that point of my life, I was so fired up for that exam.
Yeah.
And I was probably, my shoemaking was probably at that point the best it's ever been. And the speed, efficiency, fitness, I mean, it's 21 years ago now. So it was, you know, would I be able to do that now? I don't know, doubt it. But, you know, the body would probably give up. But, you know, but what I should have done, that first journey to the foot, probably 30 minutes before that, before I started again, I should have just started again with, you know, 75 minutes left on the clock, you know.
Right.
It's making those decisions is really, really important. You know, trust your ruler. I mean, Grant Moon used to always sort of was quite adamant that, you know, every time that shoe goes back in the fire, you get your ruler out and you measure and you measure. And I think something like that, to a degree, he's dead correct, because, you know, when you're making sort of remedial shoes or bar shoes and stuff, there's so much going on with that section of steel, you know, your measurements can sway either way so much. You just got to keep a constant check on it. You know, it's very important. Very important. So
now, something I wanted to ask that could be a source of confusion for North American folks is especially on Hines. So on a front limb, the idea of trimming to level, is that long axis, or is there, because, you know, there are the different methods of trimming, like you could make sure that the heels are the same distance from the frog, and like there's different ways of looking at it. What takes precedence in the hierarchy of your trimming?
I think, and again, this has always been a bone of contention. I think a lot of those feet, you know, if you stand in front and you look through it, if you look down the long axis, if you trim it so that you've got level heels, neither one of those, when you go back and look at it, is going to be that far out. But just for me, they are just different ways of looking at stuff. Now, obviously, if you've got horses with extreme conformation defects, then what's level down the long axis isn't necessarily given a true representation of what's level on the ground.
Yeah, right.
But again, most of the time, the horses we provide for the examinations are pretty they're pretty steady away. I mean, like, they're not got exactly straight legs, but they've not got anything too out there. You know, they're within reason. I mean, again, long axis does tend to be the way most people view it, but again, I know there was a bit of a sort of consultation with the worshipful company at one of their standard setting days about how they judge, best way to judge the foot trim, because you know, you've got foot mapping, you've got all these different ways of looking at the same thing, and there is no wrong or right, because if any of them, if it was wrong or right, we'd all be doing that method by now, you know.
Right.
So a lot of it's taken into consideration, and you know, within that there are tolerances.
Okay.
You know.
Well, and then the next question was on hind limbs, because most of our older textbooks taught us to sight down the long axis for that, but I've got a few British ones and then Chris Gregory's where they're talking about looking on the ground, and that's where you're getting your level from. So
yeah,
is sort of the same thing, same answer.
Well, and again, yeah, pretty much. But again, you know, that hind limb doesn't hang like a front, and you know, depends on the angle of the fetlock, and we get all that. But just remember, and especially with the associate level exam, you have got the trot up before and after the dynamic assessment. Okay. We as shoeers, most remedial shoeing we do when we talk about footfall and static dynamic balance and stuff, most of the things we are dealing with when it comes to conditions of pathology, the most important thing is level footfall. So when you watch that horse do the walk up and trot up, where's its foot landing? That is really important. I mean, if it's landing really hard on the inside or the outside, then that's what you need to address. You know, when you do the trot up at the end of it, have you made it any better?
Right.
You know, but again, you know, there's a link with that and the static. So what you see on the dynamic, you're probably going to see when you stand that horse up and you look through it. And remember, when you do the trot up as well, if you watch it walk up and trot up and it comes back, if you want to see it again, say I want to see it again.
Okay. Yep.
You know, but they'll keep running that horse. Well, obviously they've got an exam to start at some point, but they will keep running that horse for you.
Okay, that's good to know.
You know, so yeah, that's kind of hopefully answered that one.
Was there anything else in that category you wanted to touch on then? I think that.
No, only other than just remember it is the associate exam. You know, your foot trim. You know, yes, it's got to be functional, it's got to be level, flat, and you've got to take off the required amount of foot, but it's got to be tidy. Yeah. You know, you don't want the finish of the rough side of the blunt hella sort of like blue tang. You know, it's got to be finished to a high standard. You know, and that's from your foot trim. You know, you don't want big knife marks in it. You know, you want to be making that foot look nice, getting there with a sander. Sanding block and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So yeah, but it's just it's taking it all to that standard, you know.
Yep, makes sense. And then I guess we touch on your favorite component of the exam, the theory.
Yes.
I remember the first time we talked, you were saying how your forging was super strong, but it was the theory that was always that you worked harder on. So what kind of things can you say in that category that will help us?
Well, I mean, again, unfortunately for most people sitting their associate exam, it's been a long time since they've had their head in the books. I mean, again, some guys just signed up to the AW course we're doing, and one of them in particular was a student of mine when we was in the army, and he said ever since I did my diploma in the army, he said I've not even opened a book. So in fairness to him, you know, he's quite an academic chap anyway. He's got that kind of mindset, so he's certainly not dumb, but you know, so he'll pick it up quite quickly. But you know, for many people, it's the first studying they've done since they did their diploma, and if that was 10, 12 years ago, it's quite a higher mindset to get back into. But the one thing I've noticed with students across the board since I've been teaching is younger students are they tend to avoid the theory stuff and they want to do the practical stuff. Whereas the older and more mature they get, they tend to go the other way. They certainly find trying to learn new skills sort of a bit more difficult. So if they've not got a lot of concept when it comes to shoemaking, that's quite hard to teach them on average. But from the theory point of view, even if they did struggle with it when they were younger, with maturity comes problem solving. And it's like, well, I need to learn this information, and they put the effort in, but also try and find ways to help them or help themselves. So, which is in many aspects is a bit easier. I know my own personal journey. I knew coming out of my diploma that had been the hardest part for me. So I put more effort into that when I did the part which I felt easy.
Right.
I think, again, there's a lot of grey areas with the syllabus of the associate theory, in the sense it could be anything. Whereas when you then break that down into the anatomy, biomechanics, systems, and apparatus, you know, and then you've got your pathologies and, you know, different shoeing types, different shoeing plans for different types of horse. When it's not actually grown that much from what it was at diploma level. It's just a bit more in depth. And I'd say in the UK, we teach a lot of the theory at diploma level quite hard now. I mean, anatomically, we're going in quite deep.
Okay.
And this, you know, and like I say, certainly at Hereford over the last 5 years, I think we've had 2 students fail their diploma theory exam. So not only are we going in deep, but my colleagues are obviously teaching it really, really well, because these people are passing it, you know. So
right. Yeah.
which is good. I've always kind of likened the associate to being able to pass your diploma at very high level, and also add the experience that you've gained in the last 4 to 10 years in actually doing it. If that makes sense. So whereas the best way to explain it is, and let's pick on side bone again. If you've got a question on how to shoe a horse with side bone, well, the book says that you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to make sure that happens, which is correct. But then at an associate level, not only has that all got to be correct and completely on the money, you also need to talk about what you found out by doing that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So what's your experience? Well, we know the textbook says we've got to put a shoe on and it's got to be that shape, but actually sometimes it turns out if we've got the side bone, if we've got the process of ossification going on and it's early doors, that foot may not have contracted yet. So sometimes we need to put a more regular symmetrical shoe shape on it. You know, you start to add your bits in, you know.
Right.
You know, and talk about the effects, more of the effects of you have a lot more questions sort of like along the lines of what are the biomechanical effects to the horse's limb of using a heart bar. So, you know, because it said the limb, you're not just talking about how what happens in the foot, but how does that transmit up the limb, etc. You know, so everything's just going out a little bit more in depth.
Right.
You know, it's but again, it's I think one of the reasons that people probably do struggle with the associate theory more than the diploma theory is when you do your diploma, certainly in the UK, you've been studying for 4 years. You've been going to college, they've been teaching you how to learn, they've been teaching you information, been teaching you how to sit an exam. For a lot of these guys doing their associate, they've done a little bit of theory on the run up the year before, having spent 10 years out of it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's again, you are going that little bit more in depth, probably talking about subjects which, you know, how in depth they go into at diploma level is you know, and I think at diploma level you can kind of veer off track a little bit with your answer, and you know, as long as you get your point across, where the associate needs to be a bit more concise, because remember, you know, it's still 5 questions, so that gives you kind of roughly on average 25 minutes of actual answer writing. You know, you've got to fit your diagrams and that in as well. So that's, but it's still, whether you're at diploma level or AW level, there's only so much words you can write on a piece of paper in 25 minutes.
Right.
So, and what I would say with whereas you can go a little bit off track and talk about stuff you didn't really need to at diploma level to a degree, because of the level you go with, the associate level, you've got to be a lot more concise. You certainly haven't got time to be going and writing a whole paragraph on something you didn't need to talk about. You know, it's really important that you read the questions and actually answer the question they're asking you to talk about, you know.
BS doesn't baffle brains in this particular situation.
No. you know, and it's kind of, you know, one thing I did sort of, when I was studying for my associate, there was a big part of me, which one of the big take homes I got when I was going through that period of my life was, you know, so much of what we're taught in Farry, and we sort of like react to it like it's come out of the Bible and it must be done, is anecdotal. You know, what the AW did for me was made me start questioning everything unless it was proven.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, why it's silly things like, were certain things you do in your shoemaking or shoeing process, which you did because if you didn't do it, your boss used to shout at you. Turns out he was only doing that because his boss used to shout at him, and no one ever questioned why they did it. But it's the same when we talk about the theory. It's all very well saying, you know, oh, we stamp our nail holes here on a side bone shoe. But you've got to understand why you stamp your nails there, not just because someone told you that you had to do it. You know,
right.
That's the sort of real big thing about the associate exam. You know, it was a lot of reflection. You know, you've got to think about these things in a lot more sort of under the microscope kind of a way.
Right. Yeah. Like anatomy, it says like from proximal hock and proximal carpus down. Does it help, or is it in that category of just adding too much information to be going higher than that when they ask a question?
In my view, and from what I know, and that might be something needs clarifying a bit better on the website, you know, if you're going into your associate, I mean, obviously we're talking about things what affect the lower limb, but you've got to understand the whole horse and certainly the full limb to be able to talk about that. You know, so you've got to understand the bony column all the way up to where it attaches to the rest of the body. You've got to understand, you know, a lot of the problems we deal with nowadays, you know, from negative palmar angles, suspensory problems, you know, there's lots of links through that to like lumbosacroiliac problems, kissing spines. So you've got to understand all those processes as well. Right. Not necessarily how to, but just how the whole biomechanics of the horse all works together, you know. Right. That's important, you know. I think, you know, even at diploma level now, you know, we talk about when we do live horse observation stuff about what's going on in the top line of the horse and how many vertebrae does a horse have, etc., and breaking the spine down to your different thoracic regions and all that, you know. So you can't, you know, if you go into it just knowing the lower leg very well, you know, you need to know more than that.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
So,
I figured that would be the answer, but
yeah.
Okay. Well, so is there anything else we should cover? I do have, I've been writing down terms here for the North American listeners of some of the British sayings you've used, and I thought we could go through a glossary of terms. I had the benefit of working with a really good diploma farrier, Peter Rawlings, and so I've learned a lot of these over the years. But even I was caught off guard for some of them. So what is this material you call aluminium? Are you aware that we had ours is aluminum, right? We don't add that extra.
I've
there.
heard that. I've seen that in some of the Hollywood movies.
Yeah,
but yes, the Americans clearly have a problem with pronouncing the correct terminology, aluminium.
I always thought when Pete would say it, I always thought he just like added an extra vowel in there and wasn't aware of it. But no, turns out it's even how you write it. So another one, you said that your missus was dobbing off. What does that mean?
Well, just being loud and talking out of turn.
Okay. And then duffer?
In fairness, she was just shouting up the stairs to say hello because she just got back from dressage judging or something. I mean, she wasn't really gobbing off, but she
just in case she sees this.
She was getting in the way of our time.
Oh, okay. Duffer? Did I hear that right? I can't remember the context.
An old duffer is just, you know, one of these old sort of like knackered, probably a bit too old a horse.
Okay.
You know, just a bit past it. He's an old duffer.
Okay, gotcha. Some of us get to that point too. And spanner, when you throw a spanner in the works, I knew what you meant, but others might not.
You mess things up.
Yeah, but the spanner itself is an adjustable wrench. We actually don't.
Oh, right, yeah.
We don't ever use the word spanner. If you want to mess with an apprentice at a garage, you send them to the parts store looking for a metric conversion wrench, and apparently that's the spanner equivalent.
Yeah, we used to have something. We used to have something similar in the army where we'd get the young guy to go down to the tech stores and ask for a long wait.
A long wait.
Yeah, apparently we used to have this thing. We say, "Yeah, can you go and get a long wait?" And I go, "What's one of those?" Well, we use it. We hang it off the end of the tank barrel on the gun, and it helps obviously to balance the gun up. So we'd send down to tech and they'd say, "Yeah, can I have a long wait?" And they go, "Yeah, just sit yourself down there. I'll get back to you in a minute." And they just leave them there for about 3 hours. But
great. And then you use the Beldor word, but you guys usually have a different word for those grinders that have stolen away our ability to use rasps, right?
Linisher?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Well, we either call it a linisher or an electric apprentice.
Okay, gotcha. Now, linisher, is that just the bench grinder, or would that encapsulate also like the handheld flap disc?
No, just the bench one.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
What do you call the regular hand grinder, or is that
just
that's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've learned a lot in this last section. I think.
While we're on the subject,
okay.
So I've got a similar one for you, Ben, because obviously as a listener to the Mullins podcast, when you do this Stratum Tecturnum, and you always ask your people about what size shoe do they normally use more of.
Yep.
I've noticed that a lot of me North American friends use the word oughts.
Oughts. Yes. Yep.
But what happened to the N?
I'm not sure, but I just recently learned that was a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I never realised. I listened to your last podcast and they was on about using oughts, and I was like, but I'm sure that's got an N in it.
Nope, not here. All about
No.
efficiency. Get rid of the I in aluminum and N and not. So you guys would still classify those sizes as not or double not?
No, we'd use the word zero.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very modern. Yeah. I actually had another person reach out to me from England who had said, I think they were England. They said, you keep saying sizes, but maybe you should be asking them lengths, like shoe or foot length and measurements that way, because he said we don't all use the same shoes. And I said, well, actually, funny enough, like if you base it off of the Kirkart system, which a lot of other companies seem to do, like they'll say, oh, it's approximately this or whatever. I'm pretty sure they're the same worldwide in that department, but I have started asking because of their suggestion, like actual measurements too. So that'll come up in other podcasts. It hasn't happened yet.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, I don't want people to think that I'm not paying attention to their suggestions. It's just it takes a while to implement them.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But...
So yeah, and one other thing we should cover: a gentleman who recently had gone and taken the exam over there as a North American wanted everybody to know that there is a new stipulation. I think it's with the BFPA, right? BFBA, sorry, where you actually have to pay a higher fee in order to shoe the horses for the exam than what you normally would have, just for people to be aware of it. Do you know about that?
Right. Yeah. No. So, are you on about the overseas temporary registration?
That's the one. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's actually that's to do with the worship. Get me acronyms right.
Yeah.
That's to do with the Farriers Registration Council.
Oh,
obviously,
sorry.
because in the UK, because we've got obviously this Act of Parliament which regulates people shoeing horses. So guys coming over, like on the American team, coming over to sit your exams over in this country, if you're going to shoe, even if it's just 1 foot on one day, you've got to have applied for this temporary overseas registration, or you're breaking the law.
Right.
Now, incidentally, this is why the Worshipful Company of Farriers have taken the exam to South Africa, Australia, North America,
right?
Because actually it's easier for you to do it, them to come over to you to do it in your own country than you to jump through your hoops to get temporary overseas registration. So really, unless you would kind of got this thing of, I want to pass the British exam in Great Britain, then other than that, you might as well just do it in your own country on horses' feet, that you're kind of like used to the environment,
Yeah.
So, it's, I mean, there are ways of doing it, and I don't know how much it costs off the top of my head, but if you do go on the FRC webpage, that's frc.co.gov or whatever it is, but as far as Registration Council, it's quite easy to Google. If you go in, there is a piece about temporary overseas registration, and there is kind of obviously paperwork you've got to have and qualifications you've got to prove. Obviously, any questions, give them a ring and they'll put you in the right direction.
Okay. Yeah. It apparently is £200 now. So
there you go.
Budget for it. Yep.
Yeah. Go do your exam, shoot 2 feet, and cost you, well, with your exam and everything else, probably like £1,500. It's serious.
Yep.
What other industry does that?
I know, right? Yep.
It's like, I've always said, what other industry do you know who, when it gets to the weekend, they travel halfway across their country to compete in what they do Monday to Friday, pay an entry fee, and have someone else tell them that they're not very good at it?
Not many others, none that I can think
No.
of, but
No.
who knows? Maybe they're right there.
So, I don't know.
Well, this has been amazing. Super informative, and I hope the video portion, as this is the first time for me doing it, hopefully that all worked out. And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time on your Sunday to do this all.
That's fine. That's fine. So I've just got to go. I'm just going to go and clean out my truck now, and then load it up with the fishing gear ready for tomorrow.
It's time for a holiday.
Oh yeah.
Looking for you.